Chapter 30:13. The white-haired young man and the others had a total of 5 people. The white-haired young man walked toward Lu Ming and the beautiful woman, while the other 4 walked toward the Thousand River Ice Vine. The Thousand River Ice Vine suddenly attacked and killed one of the young men who was in 9th layer Heaven God. The other 8 vines danced wildly and attacked the other 3 young men. Bang! Bang! 2 of the young men reacted slightly faster and defended themselves with their attacks. However, they were still struck by the vines and were sent flying. They slammed into the wall and vomited blood. There was a woman who was not so lucky. She reacted slightly slower and was entangled by one of the vines. The temperature of the vines was shockingly low. As soon as the woman was entangled by the vines, her body was immediately covered with a layer of ice. The vines pulled the woman back toward its mouth. Help, help! The woman struggled desperately and screamed. Let her go! The white-haired young man roared and dashed toward the Thousand River Ice Vine. In the process, he turned into a frost lion and let out a roar. A terrifying gust of wind charged toward the Thousand River Ice Vine. Bang! Bang! The white-haired young man's attack landed on the Thousand River Ice Vine and caused a great impact. However, the vines were extremely tough and the white-haired young man's attack could not break them. The vines continued to pull the woman toward its mouth. Help! The woman screamed in despair. Let's attack together! The white-haired young man roared and clawed at the vines with his sharp claws. Clang! 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 The sharp claws clashed with the vines, causing sparks to fly in all directions. However, they could only leave a few marks on the vines. Even the beautiful woman could not break the vines, let alone the white-haired young man. Meanwhile, the other 2 young men who were sent flying by the vines turned into frost lions and fought against the Thousand River Ice Vine. However, it was useless. Whoosh! The rattan wrapped around the woman and threw her into its mouth. The woman's screams came to an abrupt end, and there was no more sound coming from her. The mouth of the Thousand River Ice Vine was filled with a terrifying chill. The woman could not resist it after being thrown in. Roar! After swallowing the girl, the ice vine of 10,000 rivers roared as if it had gone mad. 9 vines shot towards the white-haired youth and the other 2. The sky was filled with the shadows of the vines, covering the white-haired youth and the other 2. At this moment, even if the white-haired young man and his 2 companions wanted to escape, it would be difficult for them to do so. They charged forward a few times, only to be blocked by the vines. I'll fight you to the death! The white-haired young man bellowed as he clashed with the Thousand Rivers Ice Vine. He's not as strong as before, Lu Ming muttered. He realized that the strength of the Thousand Rivers Ice Vine was much weaker than before. Otherwise, the white-haired young man and the others would have been in danger. But now, the white-haired youth and the other 2 were actually able to fight the Thousand River Ice Vine together. I didn't expect this ice vine to have a secondary core, the quantifying formula said. Secondary core? Lu Ming was puzzled. That's right. This Thousand Rivers Ice Vine, other than having a main crystal core, also has a secondary core. Just now, when you shattered the main core, the Thousand Rivers Ice Vine actually did not completely perish. During that period of time, it was awakening its secondary core. However, a secondary core is still a secondary core. It's far inferior to the primary core. It seems that this ice vine's spiritual intelligence has been greatly reduced. It has gone mad and only knows how to attack. Moreover, its strength has been greatly reduced. The quantifying formula explained. Lu Ming understood. He could not help but secretly rejoice. It turned out that the Thousand River Ice Vine had a secondary core. Fortunately, the white-haired youth and his companions came. Otherwise, if Lu Ming went to retrieve the gem on the Thousand River Ice Vine's head, the Thousand River Ice Vine would suddenly awaken and attack. The consequences would be unpredictable. This won't do. If this continues, the outcome will be determined soon. At that time, it will be disadvantageous for us. We have to quickly absorb the chill from her body. Old quantifying formula. Can't you be faster? Lu Ming transmitted his voice to the quantifying formula. If I'm faster, it will be easy to be exposed. Moreover, your palms are separated by her palms. It's too far away from her heart and brain. The heart and brain are fragile parts. If I increase my strength, the chill will hurt her heart and brain if something goes wrong. The quantifying formula said. Then how can I speed up? Lu Ming asked again. It's simple. You put one hand on her forehead and the other on her chest. In this way, when the distance is closer, I can perform better. The quantifying formula said. Huh. Lu Ming was a little embarrassed. It was fine to put his hand on her forehead, but to put it on her chest, this was a little. Hurry up. You're a man. Don't be so wishy-washy. When the outcome is determined, don't say that I didn't remind you. The quantifying formula said. Then, okay. Lu Ming gritted his teeth and stared at the beautiful woman, saying, Miss, you see the situation now. In order to save you faster, I'm sorry to offend you. With that, Lu Ming placed one of his palms on the forehead of the extremely beautiful woman, while the other palm moved toward her chest. What are you going to do? No, don't, the woman cried out. But Lu Ming didn't bother to pay attention to her. He put his palm directly on the woman's chest. It was soft and full of elasticity, which made Lu Ming's heart skip a beat. The woman's voice stopped abruptly. She stared at Lu Ming with her big, watery eyes. In her eyes there were anger, shyness, and other complicated emotions. Her snow-white face also turned red. Cough, cough. Being stared at like this, Lu Ming couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed, even though he was thick-skinned. He coughed a few times and said to the quantifying formula, Old quantifying formula, hurry up! Leave it to me. The quantifying formula glowed, and a strong suction force flowed from Lu Ming's palm into the beautiful woman's heart and brain, absorbing the cold energy in her body. At this moment, the cold energy in her body was absorbed by the quantifying formula at an astonishing speed. The ice layer on her body quickly melted and disappeared. Her body gradually regained its temperature. At this moment, the battle between the three-headed snow lions and the Thousand River Ice Vine had reached its climax. Although the Thousand River Ice Vine only had a secondary core left, it had lost its intelligence and was completely crazy. Its combat strength was also very terrifying, suppressing the three-headed snow lions. Finally, one of the snow lions couldn't hold on any longer. Its head was pierced by an ice vine and it died on the spot. At this moment, only the white-haired young man and the other young man were left. Third brother, what should we do? Are we going to die here? The other young man said in fear. This young man was also a half-step divine king. His strength was slightly weaker than the white-haired young man, but he was still very strong. They had tried many times to rush out, but the 9 rattan vines had completely sealed off their escape route. Chapter 30:14. Today, we will only have a chance if we kill him. His vital point is his head. Let's work together and kill him. The white-haired youth was a decisive person. Since they could not escape, they could only fight with their lives on the line. The two of them communicated telepathically and came up with a plan. Roar! Roar! The 2 frost lions roared and unleashed their lion roar technique. The air was turbulent and a few rattans were blown away. Then, the 2 of them charged towards the rattan's head. However, there were 9 vines. Immediately, the other vines shot towards the 2 ice snow lions to kill them. I will block the rattans. You go and kill him. At this moment, one of the frost lions roared. Divine power was burning all over his body. He opened his mouth and roared. Lions flew out from his mouth and charged towards the rattans. This was a secret technique that was formed by the condensation of divine power. This frost lion was going all out. He burned his divine power and unleashed a terrifying secret technique. Boom! 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 The lions charged out and crashed into the rattans. They managed to push the 9 rattans away temporarily. How could the white-haired youth miss Such an opportunity. His body glowed. He roared and charged towards the ice vine's head. He waved his sharp claws and clawed at the ice vine's head. Roar! The Thousand River ice vine let out a loud roar and opened his mouth. Icicles shot out from his mouth and collided with the white-haired young man's claw. At the same time, the frost gem on the ice vine's head shone, and a white light beam shot towards the white-haired youth. This light beam was extremely terrifying, and its speed was shocking. Previously, even the beautiful lady and Lu Ming could not avoid it. The white-haired youth could not avoid it and was hit by the white light beam. Once he was hit by the white light beam, the white-haired youth's body stiffened. A layer of ice crystals appeared on the surface of his body at an alarming speed. The ice snow lion had cultivated cold attribute, divine power to begin with. Furthermore, he had mastered divine power. However, he was still unable to withstand the chill of the light beam. Bam! The white-haired youth's huge body fell to the ground and he could not move. He was not dead yet. At this moment his eyes were filled with fear. Roar! The other snow lion let out a roar of shock and anger. However, with only one frost lion left, it was even less of a match for the ice vines. The 9 ice vines danced crazily and attacked the frost lion like a storm. Soon, the ice snow lion could no longer withstand attacks. Its body was hit continuously, and it was severely injured. If we're going to die, let's die together. The ice snow lion had a crazed look in his eyes as he charged towards the ice vine. His body emitted a blinding white light. He was going to self-destruct. In the next moment, there was a terrifying explosion as the snow lion exploded. The terrifying energy swept through the entire underground space. Not good. Lu Ming stretched out his hand and grabbed the beautiful woman's slender waist. His figure flashed, and he retreated far away. He set up layers of defense in front of him to offset the impact of the outside world. When the light dissipated, the ice snow lion that had self-destructed had disappeared. The white-haired young man who had been frozen and on the verge of death had also perished. As for the Thousand Rivers ice vine, it was clearly injured as well. It was in the center of the explosion. There were several large holes in its head, and its aura was much weaker. Roar! The Thousand Rivers ice vine roared. Its furious eyes stared at Lu Ming and the beautiful woman. The 9 vines danced and rushed towards Lu Ming and the beautiful woman. Luckily, I made it in time. At this moment, Lu Ming let out a long breath. He let go of the beautiful woman and retreated quickly. Boom! Just as Lu Ming retreated, a powerful aura exploded from the beautiful woman. Lu Ming had finally absorbed the last bit of cold air from the beautiful woman's body. Once the cold air was absorbed, the beautiful woman's powerful cultivation was fully unleashed. Therefore, Lu Ming retreated quickly. Who knew if the beautiful woman would kill him after she recovered? The beautiful woman glanced at Lu Ming coldly. In the end, her figure flashed, and she charged towards the Thousand Rivers ice vine. Go to hell! The beautiful woman shouted. Sword radiance shot out one after another towards the Thousand Rivers ice vine's head. The Thousand Rivers ice vine strength was not as strong as before because of its secondary core. It had also been injured by the explosion of the ice snow lion, and its strength had weakened significantly. As such, it was no match for the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman only needed to pay attention to the white light beam that she shot out. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Sword radiance shot towards the Thousand Rivers ice vine like a tidal wave. Some of the sword lights deflected the vines, while the rest of the sword lights slashed at the ice vine's head, leaving a sword wound on it. Roar! The Thousand Rivers ice vine roared crazily. It had no spiritual consciousness. Its head glowed, and another light beam flew out from the gem. However, this time, the beautiful woman was prepared for it. She was far enough away and dodged the beam of light with a flash. Slash! The beautiful woman shouted. She held her sword with both hands, and a terrifying sword radiance shot up to the sky. Then the sword radiance slashed at the Thousand Rivers ice vine. The power of the sword radiance was too strong. It was an all-out attack from the beautiful woman. It deflected the 9 vines and slashed at the Thousand Rivers ice vine's head. Poof! The Thousand Rivers ice vine's head was split into 2. This time, the Thousand Rivers ice vine was dead. Its huge corpse fell heavily on the ground. After killing the Thousand Rivers ice vine, the beautiful woman turned around and looked at Lu Ming. Lu Ming's body tensed up and he was ready for a big fight. You saved my life this time, and I'll let you off this time. The next time we meet, I won't let you off. Remember, the one who killed you is Lan Ling. After leaving these words coldly, the beautiful woman turned into a sword radiance and dashed into the tunnel. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Phew! After the beautiful woman left, Lu Ming heaved a sigh of relief. The beautiful woman had some conscience and did not continue to kill him. Otherwise, he would have to run for his life again. Lan Ling, is that her name? Lu Ming muttered. Then he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He had mixed feelings. A beautiful woman appeared out of nowhere and said that she wanted to marry him. No one would be calm. I have to increase my strength quickly. Otherwise, I'll be hunted down by this crazy woman again. Lu Ming muttered and walked towards the Thousand Rivers ice vine. The Thousand River ice vine's head was split in half by Lan Ling. Its secondary core was also shattered by the destructive sword energy. It couldn't be more dead than it already was. Luckily, the frost gem is fine. Lu Ming looked at the gem on the Thousand Rivers ice vine's head. It was still intact. Luckily, the angle of Lan Ling's attack was slightly off. Otherwise, if the gem was shattered, Lu Ming would vomit blood. In a flash, Lu Ming came to the Thousand Rivers ice vine's head. He took out a battle sword and removed the frost gem from the Thousand Rivers ice vine's head. Chapter 30:15. The gemstone was extremely cold and emitted a terrifying chill. The quality of this gemstone is definitely not inferior to the ice jade chilling heart of the Ice Spirit clan. Lu Ming whispered, Kid, with this coldest gemstone, you can neutralize a part of the energy of the stellar core, and I can quickly refine a part of the energy. The quantifying formula said, Okay, then you can absorb it. Lu Ming said. Then Lu Ming's glabella lit up, and the quantifying formula flew out and shone at the coldest gemstone. The coldest gemstone disappeared and was absorbed by the quantifying formula. After the quantifying formula absorbed the gemstone, it flew back to Lu Ming's sea of consciousness and calmed down and began to refine the energy. Lu Ming sized up. First, his gaze fell on the 9 vines of the Thousand River ice vine. The Thousand River ice vine was born naturally. It could be said that its entire body was a treasure. Lu Ming was especially envious of the 9 vines. In the previous battle, Lu Ming had seen the power of the 9 vines. Not only were they extremely tough, but they were also filled with a terrifying chill. If he could refine the 9 vines into the ice shackles, wouldn't the power of the ice shackles increase greatly? The power of the ice chains was not bad, but it also had a weakness, and that was its fragility. It was effective against cultivators of the same level, or even 2 or 3 levels higher. However, Lu Ming's enemies were often 4 or 5 levels higher than him, and the ice chains were easily defeated. However, if the vines were refined into the ice chains, the weakness of the ice chains would disappear, and its power would definitely skyrocket. Let's do it. However, there was a problem that gave Lu Ming a headache. How to cut off the vines. Lu Ming circled around the body of the Thousand River ice vine a few times, and his eyes lit up. Then he took out a battle sword and cut at the place where the vines were connected to the head. The head of the Thousand River ice vine was not that hard. Soon, Lu Ming removed a vine. So heavy! Lu Ming grabbed the rattan and waved it slightly. The rattan danced and pierced through the air, emitting a terrifying whistling sound. It was extremely heavy, and there was a gust of cold air that drilled into Lu Ming's arm. Lu Ming was overjoyed instead of shocked. The more mysterious the vines were, the greater the benefits. Immediately, Lu Ming sat down cross-legged. With a thought, an ice chain flew out. Back then, he had refined a lump of cold liquid for this ice chain, and it was the most powerful. Lu Ming had to first refine the rattan into this ice chain, activating the ice shackle's secret technique. The ice shackles wriggled and completely overlapped with the vines, and then began to refine them. Of course, this kind of rattan was incomparably tough. Refining it wasn't that easy. Lu Ming spent a full half a month to completely refine the rattan and merge it with the ice chains. With a thought, the ice shackles began to dance like a long snake. Hoo, hoo, hoo! The ice chains whipped the air, giving off a terrifying whistling sound. Bam! The ice chains whipped the ground, causing the ground to shake and gravel to splatter. A ravine a few meters deep was formed. What a powerful force! Lu Ming's eyes lit up. One should know that the ground here had been eroded by the frigid underworld qi for many years, and was already incomparably tough. However, after being whipped by the ice chains, it caused great damage. On the other hand, the ice chains were completely fine. Then Lu Ming took out a high-grade divine sword and slashed it with all his might on the ice chains. Clang! Sparks flew, and the divine sword buzzed nonstop. However, there was no mark on the ice chains. Tough, it was too tough. It had completely inherited the characteristics of the 1,000-river ice rattan. Kid, you have a good idea. The 1,000-river ice rattan is naturally bred by heaven and earth. It has endless potential and is far from reaching its peak. Therefore, as long as you refine its rattan into your secret technique, as your cultivation increases, the power of your secret technique will continue to increase. Measuring Formula said. Lu Ming also showed a look of joy and said, Old Liang, how's the refining of the energy going? Refining the energy naturally can't be done overnight. However, I've already refined a part of it. I can transfer it to you now. Measuring Formula said, Let's wait for a while. Let me refine the remaining rattan first. Lu Ming said. Next, Lu Ming continued to work hard. He cut off the remaining 8 rattan vines and refined them into his ice chains. Lu Ming found that it was more difficult to integrate the remaining ice chains with the rattan vines. It also took a longer time. In this way, Lu Ming used a full year's time to refine the remaining 8 rattan vines and integrate them into the ice chains. With a thought, the 9 ice chains danced and whistled in the air. With another thought, the 9 ice chains disappeared without a trace. He could use it freely. In that case, my battle prowess has increased a little, Lu Ming said with a smile. Currently, the 9 ice chains were extremely sturdy. They could be used for both offense and defense. Ordinary people would not be able to break them. As a result, Lu Ming's ability to protect himself had increased significantly. Old Liang, now, transfer the refined energy to me. Lu Ming transmitted his voice to Measuring Formula. Now, it was time to raise his cultivation. All right, be careful, Measuring Formula said. Following it, a strong and pure energy surged out. Lu Ming sat with his legs crossed and began to cultivate by absorbing the energy. The energy was extremely pure. Lu Ming could easily refine it and convert it into his own god force. In his dantian, the 5 godly flames formed by the 5 different kinds of god force grew stronger. The 5 godly flames were initially equivalent to the first layer heaven god realm, but they were rapidly approaching the second layer heaven god realm. A few days later, the flames of the 5 godly flames suddenly skyrocketed and successfully reached the second layer heaven god realm. The improvement continued. 10 days later, the 5 godly flames reached the third layer heaven god realm. The speed was extremely shocking. This meant that Lu Ming was constantly breaking through the stages and breaking through realms. If he were to cultivate normally, it would definitely take a lot of time. A few hundred years was considered short. A few thousand years, or even 10,000 years, were considered normal. That was the benefit of having measuring formula. The 5 godly flames were still improving, approaching the 4th layer heaven god realm. However, when they reached the peak 3rd layer heaven god realm, they ran out of energy. The energy that emerged from measuring formula was completely refined. Is there any more? Lu Ming asked measuring formula eagerly. You should be satisfied to have so much energy in a year's time. Measuring formula said. Lu Ming was speechless. However, on second thought, he should be satisfied. Without the frost gem, even with measuring formula, it would take a few hundred years to refine the energy of the stellar core. Now, Lu Ming should be satisfied to have achieved it in a year's time. Chapter 3016. However, there's still a lot of energy left in the extreme frost gem. It can also neutralize the energy of many stellar cores. Wait for a while. The measuring character formula said. Lu Ming nodded and immediately started cultivating. This underground space was very remote. It was located in the frigid, nether forbidden land, and almost no one came here. Since Lan Ling left, no one else came here. Lu Ming was also happy to be free and focused on cultivating. When the measuring character formula didn't give him energy, Lu Ming would focus on comprehending divine skills and secret arts. When there was energy, Lu Ming would refine it. Every few months, the measuring character formula would give him a surge of energy. Just like that, another 2 years passed. Lu Ming had stayed here for more than 3 years. In these 3 years, Lu Ming's cultivation increased rapidly. In the beginning, the 5 divine flames condensed from divine grade divine force were all raised to the same level as the sovereign's divine force and imperishable sword force. Then, the 9 divine forces broke through at the same time. Just a few days ago, Lu Ming successfully broke through to the 5th level of the heavenly god realm. The 9 divine forces in his body all broke through to the 5th level of the heavenly god realm. This made Lu Ming's battle strength soar. With my current battle strength, it shouldn't be difficult to deal with that white-haired youth. Lu Ming muttered to himself, secretly estimating his own strength. That white-haired youth was a half-step God King realm. His divine force awakened was around 60 to 70%. 3 years ago, Lu Ming definitely wouldn't be his opponent. But now, Lu Ming was confident that he could defeat this person. Lu Ming estimated that his current strength should be around the half-step God King realm. His divine force awakened was around 80 to 90%. The comparison of strength here referred to the geniuses who had divine power. Those who didn't control divine grade divine force wouldn't have awakened their divine force. However, compared to someone as strong as Lan Ling, Lu Ming was probably not her match. My offensive divine skill is still at the 7th level. If I can break through to the 8th level, my strength will be stronger. Lu Ming pondered. However, this level of strength was already considered top-notch among this batch of geniuses who had entered Star Moon Ancient City. After all, there are only a few peerless geniuses who had awakened the divine power of origin. It's a pity that the energy of the coldest gem has been used up. Otherwise, I could have continued to break through. Lu Ming muttered, then shook his head. He knew that he had been too greedy. This time, not only did his other 5 divine grade divine powers improve, but his cultivation had also broken through a level. This was already a great harvest. One had to know that he had broken through 9 types of godly power at the same time. The amount of energy he needed was too terrifying. If he had only cultivated one type of energy, he would have definitely improved by more than 1 level. I've already wasted 3 years. It's time for me to go out for a walk. It's not easy for me to come to Star Moon Ancient City. I can't waste time like this. Lu Ming smiled and left. Not long after, Lu Ming landed on the ground and flew out of the frigid underworld forbidden land. Very few people came to the frigid underworld forbidden land. Lu Ming flew all the way and did not meet anyone. Not long after, Lu Ming left the frigid underworld forbidden land. After leaving the frigid underworld forbidden land, Lu Ming took out a map and looked at it. This map was naturally the one that Wu Zixiong had given him. Soon, Lu Ming locked onto the location. Myriad God Cliff. On the map, there was a large circle that was marked with large black letters. This was an important place in Star Moon Ancient City. Wu Zixiong and the others had mentioned before that Lu Ming could cultivate at the Myriad God Cliff when he was free. This was because this place could help one awaken the divine power of origin. It was said that many people had awakened their divine power of origin at the Myriad God Cliff. Some people had also awakened their divine power of origin after cultivating at the Myriad God Cliff and returning to the Starry Sky Camp. This was a must-visit place to enter Star Moon Ancient City. A few years ago, Lu Ming would have already gone there if it wasn't for the fact that he was looking for the absolute frost treasure to increase his strength. However, it wasn't too late to go there now. Lu Ming followed the map and headed towards the Myriad God Cliff. 2 days later, Lu Ming arrived at the Myriad God Cliff. The Myriad God Cliff was a cliff. However, this cliff was very majestic. It was hundreds of thousands of feet high, and there were statues carved on the cliff. The statues were of different sizes, and they were carved with different kinds of gods. Some were ferocious, some were majestic, some were terrifying at a glance. There were no less than 10,000 statues. It was said that these statues were all carved with the primordial gods. In the sky outside the Myriad God Cliff, there were many stone platforms floating in the air. These stone platforms were very large. Each of them was 10 miles long and wide. From high to low, from far to near, they were like stairs floating in the air. On each of these stone platforms, there was a figure sitting cross-legged. There was only one figure on each stone platform. There were also many figures standing in the void outside the stone platforms, watching from afar. Lu Ming flew over. Many people glanced at Lu Ming and ignored Lu Ming. Although Lu Ming had passed the heavenly gate and many people knew him, they didn't take him seriously because his cultivation was very low. Lu Ming didn't care and looked forward. There was a person sitting cross-legged on each stone platform. There was a layer of light covering each person's body. "Brother, why is there only one person on each stone platform? Can't others go up?" Lu Ming asked an honest-looking young man beside him. "You just arrived, right?" The honest-looking young man glanced at him. "Yes, yes." Lu Ming said with a smile. Legend has it that these stone platforms were used by the ancient gods during the early days of the Heavenly Palace to observe the cultivation of the Myriad Deity Cliff. The ancient gods were very large, so the stone platforms are so big. Moreover, each stone platform can only accommodate one person at a time. If there are too many people, they will be bounced off. The honest-looking young man explained. "I see." Lu Ming suddenly understood. No wonder there was only one person on each stone platform. If the stone platforms are occupied by them, won't we have no chance? Lu Ming asked again. Of course there is a chance, but everything depends on one's strength, the honest-looking young man said. Strength? What do you mean? Lu Ming asked. These stone platforms were set up with powerful restrictions in the early days of the Heavenly Palace. They operate according to certain rules. When a person cultivates on a stone platform, the formation on the stone platform will protect him. The honest-looking young man explained. Lu Ming nodded. There was a layer of light covering each person on the stone platform. That was the protective power of the formation. With the protection of the formation, you can cultivate in peace. Others can attack you, but this protection has a time limit. After 3 months, this protection will disappear. Of course, it will only disappear for a day. After a day, the protective power of the formation will reappear. Therefore, today is the day to fight for the stone platforms, the honest-looking young man said. Chapter 30:17. After hearing the young man's explanation, Lu Ming roughly understood the rules of cultivation here. Every single one of the stone platforms was protected by a formation for a period of 3 months. After 3 months, the protection of the formation would disappear. The time limit was 1 day. On that day, the others could compete for the stone platform. Whoever defeated the person on the stone platform could replace the other person and cultivate on the stone platform for 3 months. In other words, one would have to accept a challenge on the stone platform every 3 months. If one could defeat the challenger, they could continue cultivating. The higher the stone platform, the closer it is to the myriad deity cliff, the better the effect of cultivation. Therefore, one can also challenge the higher the stone platform. However, the higher the stone platform, the stronger the person is. Ordinary people are no match for them. The young man explained. Lu Ming nodded and looked at the stone platform at the top. There were a total of 3 stone platforms at the top closest to the myriad deity cliff. There were 3 figures sitting cross-legged on them. It's him. Lu Ming knew one of them. He was one of the 4 supreme talents who had passed the heaven gate. He was a half-step divine king because he had awakened his origin divine force factor, although the other 2 had not awakened their origin divine force factor. Their strength should be extremely shocking. Then, Lu Ming's gaze shifted downwards. He realized that there were a total of 108 stone platforms. Lu Ming knew some of the stone platforms. The Qin family and the Jin family. Lu Ming's eyes were filled with coldness. On a few stone platforms, there were people from the Qin family sitting cross-legged. These people were the ones who wanted to kill Lu Ming. In addition, there were also people from the Jin family. Jin Xing was one of them. They are all here, hee. Lu Ming sneered and said coldly, "By the way, brother, how long can everyone cultivate on the stone platforms?" Lu Ming asked again. Everyone can cultivate for 3 years. After 3 years, you can't go up unless you come in again. The young man explained. Lu Ming nodded. No wonder some of the peak-level geniuses weren't here. Logically speaking, these geniuses wouldn't miss out on a place like this. It seemed like some of the geniuses had already been cultivating for 3 years, while others might not be in a hurry. After all, they could stay in Star Moon Ancient City for 10 years. Everyone stood in the void and waited quietly. Many of them were prepared to fight at any time. There were too many wolves and too little meat. There were only 108 stone platforms, but there were over 1,000 people here. Even if each person could only cultivate for 3 years, there were still many people who couldn't go up to cultivate. If they wanted to go up to cultivate, they could only compete with their own strength. Soon a day passed. Someone's 3 months are almost up. Suddenly, someone spoke, his eyes shining. Many people's gazes fell on a young man with a scale between his eyebrows in the bottom row. A member of the Qin clan? What a coincidence. I want this seat. Lu Ming muttered. At this moment, the light barrier around the Qin family's heavens, chosen, suddenly began to shine brightly. When the light reached its limit, it quickly dimmed and the Qin family's heavens, chosen, opened his eyes. At the same time, at least 100 figures rushed out and rushed towards the stone platform. I want this stone platform. Who do you think you are? Get lost. This opportunity to challenge is mine. Mine. Angry roars could be heard. Then, a bright divine light filled the air. Over 100 people were fighting fiercely in the air. Everyone wanted to step onto the stone platform to obtain the right to challenge. Whoever stepped onto the stone platform first would have the right to challenge. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, there were continuous roars and terrifying explosions. All kinds of divine light and attacks were constantly colliding. However, the young men who were cultivating on the stone platforms didn't seem to feel anything at all. Obviously, the light barrier formed by the formation was protecting them. It even isolated them from the outside world. This way, they could cultivate in peace and not be disturbed by the outside world. A total of over 100 heavens, chosen, fought fiercely. For a moment, No one could step onto the stone platform. That was because if anyone approached the stone platform, they would be attacked by the others. Ah, a scream was heard. One of the Heaven's Chosen wanted to rush onto the stone platform, but was attacked by the others. Dozens of divine light drowned the Heaven's Chosen. After a scream, the Heaven's Chosen vanished into thin air and nothing was left. The killing continued. There were people who were injured and people who were forced to withdraw. Some of the remaining people didn't make a move. Some of them knew that they weren't strong enough and wouldn't be able to compete. I want this stone platform. At that moment, Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. Suddenly, his body moved like a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the stone platform. His speed was shocking as he rapidly approached the stone platform. However, the others also noticed Lu Ming. "You're courting death. Get lost." Many people attacked. In an instant, dozens of divine light shot towards Lu Ming. "Rock of the ninth heaven." Lu Ming bellowed and cast the 9 heavens Kuan Peng technique. His divine power condensed into a Kuan Peng. He flapped his wings, and his body suddenly accelerated, avoiding the attacks. The next moment, he landed on the stone platform. "He's so fast." Many people were shocked. In that instant, they didn't have time to attack. Then many people sighed. It seemed that they wouldn't have a share of the stone platform. Once someone stepped onto the stone platform, it would be useless for others to compete. Seeing Lu Ming step onto the stone platform, the battle in the sky stopped and everyone looked at Lu Ming. Stepping onto the stone platform was only the first step. If one wanted to obtain the right to cultivate on the stone platform, they would have to defeat the person who had cultivated before them, unless the other party voluntarily withdrew after 3 years. "Lu Ming, it's you." The Heavens Chosen of the Qin clan looked at Lu Ming with a cold gaze. "Of course it's me. It's time to settle the score with you all for surrounding me that day." Lu Ming said coldly, "Settle the score? Haha, you think you can do that?" The Heavens Chosen of the Qin clan sneered and emitted a powerful aura. 9th layer, Heaven God Realm. This Heavens Chosen of the Qin clan had a cultivation of the 9th layer Heaven God Realm. This time he had cultivated on the stone platform for half a year, and his God force had awakened by a lot, reaching 50%. Lu Ming wanted to settle the score with him? Courting death. Bang! Lu Ming couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He took a step forward and a powerful aura rose. The God force in his body burst out. The God force on the surface of his body danced like flames. Then the battle character art was activated. However, Lu Ming didn't use the ancient God body. With Lu Ming's current cultivation, he didn't need to use the ancient God body to deal with a 9th layer Heaven God Realm genius, whose God force had awakened by 50%. A terrifying aura surged toward the Heavens Chosen of the Qin clan. The Heavens Chosen of the Qin clan widened his eyes and exclaimed, "Your aura! How is this possible?" The young man of the Qin clan was frightened. How could a 5th layer Heaven God Realm cultivator have such a terrifying aura? Chapter 3018. The divine power in Lu Ming's body surged, forming a shockwave that dashed in all directions. The aura was so powerful that it shocked not only the Qin family's elites, but also the surrounding people. They could not help but widen their eyes. His aura was even stronger than the Qin family's level 9 heavenly god. "Ice chain," Lu Ming said in a low voice. Then 9 ice chains shot out from his body. 7 wound divine fist. At this moment, the Qin family's prodigy finally reacted. He roared as his body glowed and threw out a punch. A giant fist print as big as a mountain pressed down on Lu Ming. Bam! 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 3 of the ice chains struck the opponent's fist imprints. The fist imprints trembled and exploded, but the ice chains were completely fine. After refining the 9 vines of the 1,000 River Ice Vine, the ice chains were extremely tough. It was impossible for the prodigy to break them. The other 6 ice chains flew forward and continued to attack the Qin family's prodigy. The Qin family's prodigy was shocked. He unleashed all his strength and even injured himself to increase the power of the 7-wound divine fist. Boom! Boom! He threw out a few more punches in an attempt to break the ice chains. However, after the ice chains collided with the fist print, they only bounced slightly and changed their direction. Then, they continued to attack the Qin family's prodigy. Poof, poof! A few ice chains pierced through the Qin family's prodigy's defense and wrapped around him. A terrifying chill spread out and a layer of ice appeared on the Qin family's prodigy's body. He couldn't move at all. Spare me! Spare me! The Qin family's prodigy was scared to death and screamed. Outside the stone platform, the others were also dumbfounded. It ended just like that. The Qin family's prodigy was defeated in just a few moves. Wasn't it a little too fast? What a powerful secret skill. Lu Ming's secret skill is so powerful. I didn't expect him to be so powerful. He's only a level 5 heavenly god. No wonder he could pass the gate of heaven. Many people exclaimed, "You wanted to kill me before, and now you're begging for mercy. Is that possible?" Lu Ming's indifferent voice rang out. With a thought, a chain of ice shot out like a sharp spear, piercing towards the other party's forehead. Puff! The other party's glabella was pierced through. He struggled for a moment before falling. Then, with a swing of the ice shackles, the corpse was flung out of the stone platform. After dealing with the genius of the Qin clan, Lu Ming sat down cross-legged and waited for the day to pass. There was only one chance to challenge. Since Lu Ming had succeeded in his challenge, the others could not continue to challenge. If they wanted to challenge again, they could only wait for 3 months. Soon the day arrived. A light screen appeared on the stone platform, enveloping Lu Ming. At this time, Lu Ming's vision turned black, and he sank into complete darkness. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, Lu Ming felt a terrifying explosion coming from outside. Heaven and earth shook violently. Lu Ming quickly opened his eyes and was shocked by the scene in front of him. In the starry sky of the universe, a group of giants were fighting. The so-called giants were because their bodies were too huge. Each of the giants stood in the starry sky of the universe. They were shockingly burly. Their fists were bigger than a planet. They were ancient gods or primitive divine spirits. Lu Ming's heart was beating violently. The giants in front of him were all primitive divine spirits. A group of primitive divine spirits were fighting fiercely. The starry sky of the universe was boiling. Stars were falling like meteors, and some stars were exploding like fireworks. Heaven and earth were destroyed. This was the real destruction of heaven and earth. In such a battle, a galaxy would be destroyed in a short time. Not good. Suddenly, Lu Ming's face changed drastically. This was because he saw a beam of divine power rushing towards him. This divine power was filled with an ancient and desolate aura. After awakening his divine power origin factor, it was somewhat similar to this aura. However, it was still worlds apart. It was a difference in essence. This was because this was the divine power origin that primitive divine spirits controlled. Lu Ming's heart was in his throat. His body was tense. He wanted to escape, but he realized that he could not. Am I going to die here? A thought flashed through Lu Ming's mind. The divine power gave him a terrifying feeling. If he was hit, there would be nothing left of him, not to mention him. Even a peak divine king or someone above the divine king realm would be killed instantly in the face of such a divine power. The speed of the divine power was too fast. Lu Ming only had a few thoughts before the divine power bombarded his body. However, Lu Ming did not feel anything at all. Lu Ming looked at himself and touched himself. He found that he was fine. It was as if he was transparent. The divine power rushed through his body and bombarded a huge planet in the distance. The planet exploded with a bang. I'm fine. Are these all illusions? Lu Ming swallowed his saliva and heaved a sigh of relief. Next, he observed carefully. Sure enough, All of these were illusions and not real. Perhaps they were projections from countless years ago. Then Lu Ming thought of the god statues on the myriad deity cliff. Perhaps these were projections from those god statues. However, I can feel the fluctuation of the divine power. Different primordial divine spirits control different divine powers. Lu Ming's eyes lit up as he observed carefully. These primitive divine spirits controlled different origin divine powers. Many of the divine grade divine powers could be traced back to these origin divine powers. If he could find a divine grade divine power of the same origin as the one he controlled, he would definitely benefit greatly from it. No wonder it was said that this place was very useful for comprehending divine power. It could even awaken the origin divine power. I control 7 types of divine grade divine powers. Which one should I cultivate first? I'd better cultivate the sovereign's God force first. In the end, Lu Ming decided to cultivate the sovereign's God force first. The sovereign's God force was the first divine grade divine power he had controlled, and his comprehension of it was also the deepest. It would be easier to cultivate, but first he had to find a primitive divine spirit that controlled the same origin divine power as the sovereign's God force. Let's go. Lu Ming tried to move. With a thought, his body flew out at an unimaginable speed. Around him, numerous primitive divine spirits were fighting fiercely, but Lu Ming was completely unaffected. His body passed right through them. That's the origin divine power of the sun. Lu Ming saw a primordial divine power emitting a glow that was brighter than a star. It went berserk, grabbing a star as a weapon and throwing it at its enemy. It was extremely ferocious. The divine power that this primordial divine spirit controlled was the origin divine power that was similar to the divine power of the sun. Lu Ming also happened to be in control of the sun divine power. I'd better find the origin divine power of the sovereign's God force first. Lu Ming suppressed his desire and continued searching. Chapter 3019. Lu Ming continued his search. Not long after, he finally found something. It was a primordial god, shrouded in a purplish gold radiance that obscured its appearance. However, the strange thing was that this primordial god wasn't very big. It was only about 100 meters tall. Compared to the other primordial gods that were larger than a planet, it was like a speck of dust. However, the aura it exuded wasn't weak at all. In fact, it was even stronger. When it punched out, the force of its punch could pierce through several planets and force a primordial god to retreat. How terrifying! This is the origin power of a sovereign's god force. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. He stood not far away and observed carefully, trying to comprehend it. Being able to observe the origin power of a primordial god at such a close distance had greatly affected him. What an exquisite divine power! What a terrifying divine power! I originally thought that divine grade divine power was the strongest divine power, but compared to this origin divine power, it's trash. No, it's even worse than trash. Lu Ming exclaimed. It was like a shriveled sponge that was crazily absorbing nutrients. Lu Ming lost track of time as he immersed himself in comprehending the sovereign's god force. Originally, his comprehension of the sovereign's god force wasn't deep. His awakening level wasn't even 10%, maybe 2%. He was still a long way from truly awakening it. But now his awakening level was rapidly increasing. Awakening level was 2%, 3% for percent after an unknown amount of time. His awakening level reached 20%. This speed of improvement was shocking. Lu Ming felt that his use of the sovereign's god force had improved. Of course, the lower the awakening level, the easier it was to awaken it. The higher the awakening level, the harder and slower it would be to improve it. At this time, Lu Ming felt a force acting on him. His vision darkened again. In the next moment, there was a flash of light. He opened his eyes and found that he was still sitting cross-legged on the stone platform. Lu Ming knew that the 3-month period was up. The layer of light shield disappeared from Lu Ming's body. Lu Ming stood up and looked around, waiting for the others to challenge him. However, for a moment, no one dared to rush forward. 3 months ago, the strength that Lu Ming displayed was truly shocking. A 9th-level heavenly god genius was killed by Lu Ming in just a few moves. Without confidence, how could they dare to challenge Lu Ming? Lu Ming is too strong. I'm no match for him. Let's wait for someone else's stone platform. That's right. There are a total of 108 stone platforms. On average, someone's time is up in less than a day. Let's wait a little longer. Some people were discussing. Lu Ming waited for a long time, but no one challenged him. It seems like no one is going to challenge me. Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. However, he did not sit cross-legged. His gaze landed on the stone platform above. The higher it was, the closer it was to the myriad god cliffstone platform, the better the effect. Lu Ming was no longer satisfied with his current stone platform. He wanted to find a better one. After all, each person could only cultivate for 3 years. He couldn't afford to waste his time. Could it be that Lu Ming wants a higher stone platform too? The crowd guessed after seeing Lu Ming's condition. At the same time, many people's eyes flickered. If Lu Ming left his current stone platform, it would be ownerless. Thus they could compete for it. At this moment, on the row of stone platforms above Lu Ming, someone's body was suffused with radiance. The time was almost up. What a coincidence! Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. The person was none other than Jin Xing. Lu Ming was initially considering if he should purposely wait for Jin Xing's time to come and chase him off the stone platform. To his surprise, Jin Xing's time was up. What could it be if it wasn't a coincidence? Jin Xing opened his eyes and scanned his surroundings. Whoosh! At this moment, Lu Ming moved at an alarming speed. In a flash, he appeared on Jin Xing's stone platform. Lu Ming! Jin Xing's expression changed drastically when he saw Lu Ming. Kill! Lu Ming took a step forward and attacked. The ice shackles flew out and wrapped around Jin Xing. However, just as Lu Ming attacked, Jin Xing also moved. He turned into a ray of golden light and rushed out of the stone platform. Jin Xing was indeed one of the 4 heroes of the Jin family. He was very decisive. The moment he saw Lu Ming, he knew that he was no match for Lu Ming. Without any hesitation, he rushed out of the stone platform. In this way, when Lu Ming's attack reached him, he had already left. In an instant, he had rushed out of the stone platform. This guy runs pretty fast. Lu Ming muttered. Lu Ming, I won't let you off so easily. Jin Xing stood in the crowd, his eyes cold. Charge! That stone platform is mine. At this moment, many people reacted and rushed toward the stone platform that Lu Ming was on. The curtains of a chaotic battle were raised once again. After a chaotic battle, the stone platform was finally occupied by a 9th-level heavenly god. As for Lu Ming, since he had defeated Jin Xing, no one could challenge him. Let's see the effects of this stone platform first. Lu Ming sat down cross-legged and waited quietly. A day later, a light screen enveloped Lu Ming. Lu Ming's vision turned dark again. In the next moment, he arrived in another part of the universe and saw a group of primitive godly spirits fighting fiercely. This time, Lu Ming quickly found the origin of the sovereign's god force and began to comprehend it. The effects of the higher stone platforms were indeed different. It was clearer to comprehend. Lu Ming's awakening of the sovereign's god force was increasing at an even faster speed. The further one went, the harder it was to improve. However, the effects here were also better. Lu Ming's improvement speed was even faster. 3 months later, his awakening had reached about 45%. Are other people's improvement speed that fast? Lu Ming could not help but think so. Based on his improvement speed, it would not be long before he reached 80 or 90%. Were other people's improvement speed that fast? Based on his previous observations, it did not seem to be the case. I'm indeed a cultivation genius. Lu Ming smiled very narcissistically. Then, he stood up and waited for the others to challenge him. Many people hesitated. For a time, no one challenged Lu Ming. "I'll fight him." Finally, someone could not help but rush onto the stone platform and stand opposite Lu Ming. "Lu Ming, let's fight. It's just a spar, not a fight to the death. What do you think?" The young man said. He was not confident about facing Lu Ming, which was why he said that. "Sure." Lu Ming smiled slightly. He had no enmity with this person, so there was no need to fight to the death. Boom! The young man's aura completely erupted. His god force burned fiercely. The young man's cultivation was infinitely close to the half-step godly king realm. Chapter 30:20. The youth that challenged Lu Ming was close to the half-step divine king realm. His aura was surging. "Lu Ming, take my strongest move." The youth roared as a battle axe appeared in his hand. The battle axe expanded rapidly and became 10,000 meters wide. Slash! The youth roared as he merged with his battle axe and slashed at Lu Ming with all his might. In an instant, Lu Ming activated the battle symbol art and quadrupled his combat strength. 9 ice chains flew out and enveloped Lu Ming tightly. Boom! The battle axe chopped down on the ice chain defense, and a violent roar broke out. Strong chi overflowed, and shock waves spread out in all directions. The ice chains shook a few times and remained unharmed. Lu Ming did not move an inch. On the contrary, the youth was pushed back by the rebounding force. He landed on the stone platform and took a few steps back. Powerful. "I am not your opponent. Goodbye." The youth cupped his fists and left the stone platform. He had already used his strongest move. Knowing that he was not Lu Ming's opponent, he admitted defeat and left. Lu Ming did not take it to heart. After giving a faint smile, he shifted his gaze to the stone platform above. He had already sensed the stone platform here. Although the cultivation speed was not bad, there were better ones. Why not choose a better one? Lu Ming's gaze swept across the first and second rows. This was his target. On the first row, there was a peerless genius who had awakened his divine origin power. Lu Ming was not his opponent yet. Naturally, he would not challenge him. As for the other two people, Lu Ming reckoned that they were also very close to awakening the origin divine power factor. The degree of divine power awakening was estimated to be more than 90%. Lu Ming was not confident of defeating them. Lu Ming looked at the second row again. Lu Ming planned to challenge the second row first. He would challenge the geniuses on the first row after his divine power had awakened to a higher degree. Lu Ming waited quietly. In the second row, Lu Ming found people from the Qin and Jin families. Each of the two clans had a prodigy in the second row. "Just the two of you." Lu Ming planned to challenge the two geniuses of the Qin clan and Jin clan when their time was up. Whoever arrived first would be challenged. Not long after, it was time for someone in the third row. Lu Ming's eyes flashed, but he didn't make a move. Lu Ming is actually not making a move. Could it be that he's waiting for the second row or the first row? Someone guessed in surprise. Wait for the second and first rows? It couldn't be. Was Lu Ming that strong? You should know that the first 3 rows are all half-step divine king realm geniuses, and their awakened divine force is not weak. Look at the genius in the third row. He's not challenging anyone, and he's just standing there without cultivating. He must be thinking of challenging the people above. Many people were discussing this matter. However, no one dared to challenge the genius in the third row. That genius was very strong, and there were no half-step divine kings among them. Generally speaking, a half-step divine king genius would be able to get a spot without any pressure. Only those below the half-step divine king realm would fight for it. After waiting for a day, no one dared to challenge him. That youth continued to cultivate. On the other hand, Lu Ming stood on the stone platform and continued to wait. His body was covered by a layer of light. There was a lot of freedom to cultivate here. Even if a day was up, he could choose not to cultivate. Just like Lu Ming, if a day had passed, as long as he didn't enter into a state of cultivation, he wouldn't enter the starry sky to cultivate. It would only be a waste of time if he continued to wait. Just like that, Lu Ming waited for another 2 days. On this day, there was finally some movement on the second row. A young man in a golden robe was emitting light from his body. "It's finally time?" Lu Ming murmured. A cold light flashed in his eyes. This young man in a golden robe was indeed a genius of the Jin clan. The young man from the Jin clan opened his eyes. However, he was still sitting there quietly without any intention of getting up. This was because he didn't think anyone would dare to challenge him. However, in the next moment, his eyes narrowed. This was because there was an additional person on his stone platform. Lu Ming. Lu Ming immediately rushed to his stone platform. "It's you, Lu Ming. You want to challenge me?" The genius from the Jin clan was slightly stunned when he saw Lu Ming. He was clearly surprised. "Can't I?" Lu Ming smiled faintly. "Of course you can. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." The young man from the Jin clan smiled sinisterly. "Jin Ju, don't underestimate him. He killed Qin Mu in a few moves." At this moment, Jin Xing transmitted his voice. Jin Xing hadn't left and was watching from afar. He reminded him. "Killed Qin Mu?" Jin Ju was slightly stunned. Then he said, "It seems that your strength is beyond my expectations." Although he said that, Jin Ju was still very confident. Qin Mu was only a 9th level heaven god. On the other hand, Jin Ju was a half-step divine king. Moreover, his god force had awakened to around 60%. His strength was far beyond Qin Mu's. While the two of them were talking, the others had already started fighting for Lu Ming's stone platform. Lu Ming and Jin Ju didn't make a move. They were waiting for the others to decide the winner before making a move. Not long later, when Lu Ming arrived at the stone platform, the famous flower was taken by a young man. "Now it's your turn." Jin Ju looked at Lu Ming with a cold smile. His body was emitting a golden light. The golden radiance was incomparably dense. It was like a golden armor that enveloped him. Bang! Jin Ju stepped forward. His palm turned pure golden. A golden battle sword appeared in his hand. He slashed at Lu Ming. Roar! Lu Ming let out a roar. His body swelled and he transformed into an ancient god. Facing a half-step divine king prodigy, Lu Ming had to use his ancient god body. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a match for his opponent in his normal form. However, Lu Ming also had some reservations. After unleashing the ancient god body, his battle word tactic only triggered a doubling of his combat ability. It was fine as long as it was enough. "Break the void!" Lu Ming stabbed a spear. A spear light clashed with his opponent's golden sword light, creating a terrifying shockwave. Dong! After Lu Ming made his move, he stepped forward and attacked continuously. He waved his spear and launched a storm-like attack. Sword of breaking the void. Jin Ju roared. Golden divine light surged and slashed out golden sword marks. These sword marks were terrifying. They were extremely sharp and seemed to be able to cut through everything. Clang! Clang! In the blink of an eye, the two sides had exchanged dozens of blows. Jin family's secret technique of breaking the void is indeed powerful. Even Lu Ming couldn't help but exclaim at the power of Jin family's secret technique. Jin family was one of the top families in 9 Extinction, Heavenly King Mansion. It wasn't just for show, it was because of their strength. Ice shackles. In the midst of the battle, Lu Ming willed and 9 ice shackles flew out. Chapter 30:21. 9 ice chains wrapped around Jin Ju, exuding a terrifying chill. Break! Jin Ju roared. The void, severing sword slashed at the ice chains, trying to break them. However, after a series of metallic clangs and sparks, the ice chains were undamaged. They were only sent flying by the powerful force. However, after the ice chains flew out, they turned and continued to attack Jin Ju. How is it possible that it's so tough? Jin Ju's expression changed. The ice chains were merely condensed by Lu Ming using a secret skill. They were not divine weapons. He had executed the void severing sword, but he could not sever them. This was beyond his expectations. Buzz! At this moment, Lu Ming had also charged forward. His long spear slashed down, and a crescent-shaped spear radiance slashed at Jin Ju. Jin Ju hurriedly blocked. Although he managed to block Lu Ming's attack, the ice chains attacked him again. Clang! 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 He brandished his sword and continuously slashed at the ice chains, knocking them away. However, the terrifying chill of the ice chains followed Jin Ju's battle sword and crawled toward his body. The 9th ice chain was even more terrifying. Under the stimulation of the divine power of Moon, its power became more and more terrifying. The golden radiance on Jin Ju's body was covered in a layer of frost. His movements also became somewhat stiff, and his strength was greatly affected. Kill! Lu Ming roared. He took the opportunity to launch a flurry of attacks to suppress Jin Ju. In fact, Lu Ming could easily crush Jin Ju if he used his full strength. However, Lu Ming felt that there would be more battles later. It was better to preserve some trump cards. Bam! After a few more moves, Jin Ju was swept by Lu Ming's spear radiance. The protective divine power covering his body shattered, and he was sent flying, spitting out large mouthfuls of blood. Damn it, kid. I'll settle this score another day. Jin Ju roared. He stomped his foot and was about to rush out of the stone platform. Another day? You want another day? How naive! Lu Ming's cold voice rang out. The 9 ice chains rapidly lengthened and danced in the air like an inescapable net, cutting off Jin Ju's path of retreat. Boom! Jin Ju's attack landed on the ice shackles. The ice shackles only shook, but Jin Ju's figure was blocked. Lu Ming, what are you trying to do? Don't tell me you want to kill me? You dare? Jin Ju roared. He was the top genius of the Jin clan. The Jin clan was one of the top clans in the 9 extinction Heavenly King Mansion. Lu Ming, a trash from the Qin Tian star field, dared to kill him? What answered him was Lu Ming's cold sneer. Then Lu Ming took a step forward. His spear light was like a mountain, pressing down on Jin Ju. Bang! Jin Ju was even less of a match for Lu Ming. He was sent flying by a single move, crashing into the ice chains. He was heavily injured and coughed up blood. Whoosh! The ice shackles took the opportunity to entangle Jin Ju. Let me go. Lu Ming, I order you to let me go. Jin Ju roared. Order me? You're just a prisoner and you dare to order me around? Are you out of your mind? Lu Ming was so angry that he laughed. He waved the ice shackles and smashed Jin Ju heavily on the ground. Suddenly, Jin Ju was smashed into a dead dog. Lu Ming, you better let him go. Otherwise, my Jin clan will not let you go. You should know the power of my Jin clan in the 9 extinction Heavenly King Mansion. Outside the arena, Jin Xing yelled and threatened Lu Ming. Kid, let me go. I don't believe you dare to kill me. Jin Ju roared. At this time, he still did not believe that Lu Ming would dare to kill him, especially in front of everyone. What an idiot. I'll send you on your way. Lu Ming sighed. Then, an incomparably cold, murderous intent spread out. Being shrouded by this murderous intent, Jin Ju shuddered. At this moment, his heart was cold and his eyes were filled with fear. He had a feeling that Lu Ming would really kill him. Lu Ming really dared to do so. No, don't! Jin Ju roared in horror. He was finally afraid. Don't want? I want it. Lu Ming said indifferently and stabbed out with his spear, piercing through Jin Ju's glabella. Jin Ju twitched and stopped breathing. He was killed on the spot by Lu Ming. Lu Ming! Outside the field, Jin Ju roared in anger. He did not expect that Lu Ming would dare to kill a top genius of the Jin clan. Was he not afraid of the Jin clan's revenge? I'll kill whoever wants to kill me. I don't care who they are. Lu Ming said coldly. He had experienced so much along the way and understood a principle. You must be ruthless to your enemies. If you have the chance to kill them, you must kill them, because your enemies will not give up just because you let them go. On the contrary, they will take revenge even more fiercely. Even if he did not kill Jinju, the Jin clan would not let him go. Since that was the case, why not kill him? Jinju shut up. He knew that Lu Ming was a ruthless person. Threats would not be effective. Lu Ming, just you wait! Jinju roared in his heart as a vicious plan brewed in his heart. After killing Jinju, Lu Ming took his storage ring and waited quietly. A day later, a light curtain shrouded Lu Ming. Lu Ming sat cross-legged and entered a starry space. The effect of the second row of stone platforms was indeed extraordinary. Lu Ming's cultivation speed was fast. The degree of awakening of the sovereign's divine power was also increasing rapidly. 50%, 55%, looking at Lu Ming sitting cross-legged on the stone platform. Jinju's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He wanted nothing more than to chop Lu Ming into pieces. Unfortunately, Lu Ming was protected by the formation. He could only think about it. This guy killed Qin Mu? After a period of time, a Qin clan prodigy ended his cultivation. He had cultivated on the stone platform for 3 years and could no longer cultivate, so he left the stone platform. Once he left the stone platform, Jinju told him the news. That's right. Not only did he kill Qin Mu, but he also killed the prodigy of my Jin clan, Jinju. Jinju gritted his teeth. What? He killed Jinju? He's so strong? The Qin clan prodigy was also shocked. This brat is a monster. He must be eliminated. Jinju gritted his teeth. Don't worry. The prodigy of my Qin clan, Qin Mukong, is cultivating on the second row. His divine power has already awakened to 90%. After this cultivation, he's probably very close to 100%. In addition, his divine skills have already broken through to the 8th level. It's enough to kill Lu Ming. The Qin clan prodigy said coldly. That's great. Jinju was also overjoyed. The person they were talking about was the Qin clan prodigy, cultivating on the second row. Time flew by quickly. Soon, more than 2 months had passed. At this moment, the Qin clan prodigy, Qin Mukong, who was cultivating on the second row, woke up. Chapter 30:22. The prodigy of the Qin clan, Qin Mukong, ended his cultivation and woke up. After waking up, Qin Mukong stood up and looked at the 2 youths in the first row. Now that I have awakened 99% of my divine power, I can challenge the first row and use their power to fully awaken my divine power origin factor. Qin Wushang muttered, his eyes filled with confidence. Previously, his divine power awakening wasn't that high, so he didn't dare to challenge the first row. After a period of cultivation, he was full of confidence. Of course, he didn't dare to challenge the prodigy who had awakened his divine power origin factor. He was going to challenge the other 2. Cousin Wukong. At this moment, the prodigy of the Qin clan shouted from the crowd. What's the matter? Qin Wukong turned around and asked. Qin Mu was killed. The prodigy of the Qin clan said, Qin Mu was killed? Who was it? Which aristocratic family did it? Hearing this, Qin Wukong's body exploded with cold killing intent. His cold gaze swept across the crowd. Those who were swept by his gaze had a change in expression and their heartbeat quickened. Among the prodigies below the divine king realm in the Starry Sky Battalion, Qin Wukong was definitely one of the top experts. It's him, Lu Ming. It's Lu Ming who killed Qin Mu. The prodigy of the Qin clan pointed at Lu Ming, who was cultivating. Subconsciously, Qin Wukong looked at Lu Ming. With one look, he couldn't help but be stunned. If he didn't remember wrongly, this seat belonged to Jinju. How did Lu Ming end up there? Lu Ming can kill Qin Mu. Qin Yukong's low voice sounded with some doubt. This brat is very strong. You can't just look at his cultivation. My Jin clan's prodigy, Jin Ju, was also killed by him. Jin Xing said, "What?" This time, Qin Yukong was truly shocked. Qin Mu was only a 9th level heaven god. However, Jin Ju wasn't to be underestimated. He was a half-step divine king, and yet he was killed by Lu Ming. This brat can't be left alive. Qin Yukong thought in his mind. This brat, what is his cultivation? Qin Yukong asked. 5th level celestial god, but his battle prowess is astonishing. He is at least equivalent to a half-step celestial king with 70 to 80% of awakened divine power. Jin Xing said, "This kind of strength? All right, leave this brat to me. Once his 3 months are up, I will challenge him and kill him here." Qin Yukong's voice was incomparably cold. Although Lu Ming could kill Jin Ju, he was also confident that he could kill Lu Ming. Now, his divine power had already been awakened to 99%. In addition, his mastery of several divine skills was also very shocking. He was confident enough, below the divine king realm, other than the few people who had awakened the origin divine power, he was invincible. With Brother Wukong making a move, that brat is dead for sure. Jin Xing was overjoyed. The way he looked at Lu Ming became even more ferocious. Next, Qin Yukong did not cultivate. Instead, he stood on the stone platform and waited quietly. Lu Ming was oblivious to all of this. He was fully focused on comprehending the sovereign realm's god force. As expected of the second row of stone platforms, the effects were too good. It was not something the lower rows could compare to. Lu Ming's awakening of the sovereign realm's god force was increasing rapidly. As the awakening of the sovereign realm's god force increased, so did Lu Ming's strength. Very quickly, 3 months were up. The universe disappeared, and Lu Ming opened his eyes on the stone platform. 88%. Lu Ming muttered. His awakening of the sovereign realm's god force had reached 88%. Lu Ming had only cultivated here for 9 months, and his awakening of the sovereign realm's god force had increased from 1 to 2% to 88%. If others knew about this, their jaws would drop to the ground. This speed was too shocking. I really don't know how amazing the effects of the first row are. With my current strength, I should be able to challenge the first row. Lu Ming muttered as he stood up. Bang! As soon as Lu Ming stood up, a strong pressure pressed down on Lu Ming. At the same time, a young man appeared in front of Lu Ming, staring at him coldly. This young man was none other than Qin Yukong. As soon as Lu Ming woke up, Qin Yukong rushed up to Lu Ming's stone platform. "It's him. Hee, I didn't look for him, but he came looking for me. That's fine too." Lu Ming smiled. "Kid, how can you still smile at a time like this?" Qin Yukong said coldly. "Why can't I smile? Since you're here to die, of course I have to smile." Lu Ming continued to smile. "I'm here to die? Haha. It seems like you're very confident after defeating a few people. I would like to see how strong a 5th-layer heaven god like you is." Qin Yukong said coldly. As he spoke, his body emitted a blinding light. His god force burned like flames, stirring up a terrifying gust of wind that swept toward Lu Ming. An ancient and desolate aura was released. Origin divine force factor. No, it hasn't awakened yet. Lu Ming's eyes narrowed, thinking that Qin Yukong had awakened his origin divine force factor. However, after sensing carefully, he realized that Qin Yukong hadn't awakened his origin divine force factor at all. However, he wasn't far from it. So strong, Qin Yukong's god force must have awakened to 99%. Among the crowd, there were also people who were knowledgeable and could see through Qin Yukong's strength. Such an aura, he's indeed just one step away from fully awakening his origin divine force factor. This is going to be interesting. Many people were discussing. Lu Ming, a monstrous existence, could kill a half-step God King like Jinju with his cultivation at the 5th layer Heaven God realm? Would he be able to fight against Qin Wukong? Bang! At this moment, Qin Wukong attacked. With a punch, a huge fist imprint blasted toward Lu Ming with shocking speed. Ancient God Body. Without hesitation, Lu Ming displayed his ancient God Body. At the same time, he activated the battle character art to increase his combat strength by 4 times. Facing an opponent like Qin Wukong, Lu Ming had no choice but to give it his all. His long spear vibrated and a dazzling spear light pierced through the air, piercing toward Qin Wukong's fist imprint. Bang! The spear light and the fist imprint collided, releasing a terrifying wave of energy that swept out in all directions. Fortunately, the Sky Prides cultivating on the other stone platforms were protected by a large array. As the wave of energy swept past, it didn't affect them at all. Otherwise, they would have been severely injured or even killed. Whoa! The spear light vibrated continuously and then exploded. At the same time, the huge fist imprint also exploded. He blocked it. Lu Ming can actually block Qin Wukong's fist. Many people were shocked. Qin Wukong's eyes narrowed. This kid is monstrous. Kill! Qin Wukong roared and pushed his god force to the maximum. The power of his 99% awakened divine force exploded, turning into a terrifying fist imprint that blasted toward Lu Ming. Chapter 30:23. Qin Wushang's strength was terrifying. His divine force had been awakened to 99%, and his power was shocking. Not only was his divine force extremely condensed, it even had a trace of the origin divine force's characteristics and was filled with destructive power. With such divine force, the 7 Wounds fist was not something the Qin clan's genius could compare to. Moon Slash. Lu Ming pushed the divine force in his body to the maximum. With the 7 types of divine force as the core, he condensed them into a ball and struck out with his long spear. Boom! The two clashed for the second time, and the power was even more terrifying. The stone platform under their feet shook violently. This time, the two were still on par. It was hard to tell who was stronger. The people below the stage were extremely shocked, especially Jin Xing. When Lu Ming fought with him in the Qin Tian star field, although he was stronger than him, there was a limit. How long had it been since then? Lu Ming's strength had already reached such a level. This level of strength was completely capable of insta-killing him. 7 Wounds divine fist. Qin Wushang roared as he punched out with both fists. Fist imprints shot out from his body and pressed down on Lu Ming. Sky Splitter Moon Slash. Lu Ming continued to use the first 2 moves of the apocalyptic 3 strikes to fight with Qin Wushang. The two fought fiercely, and in the blink of an eye, they had exchanged dozens of blows. Even after dozens of blows, it was hard to tell who was stronger. Awesome. Lu Ming became more excited as the fight went on. His battle intent grew stronger, and he became more proficient in using the apocalyptic 3 strikes. His divine force was endless, and he was not afraid of exhausting it. He could push the power of each of his moves to the maximum. As for Qin Wushang, the more he fought, the more shocked he became. Lu Ming was only a 5th level heavenly god. With his cultivation, he thought he could easily take down Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming's strength had far exceeded his expectations. Until now, he still had not taken down Lu Ming. Looks like I have no choice but to give it my all. A glint flashed across Qin Wukong's eyes. Soon after, his figure suddenly retreated rapidly. As he retreated, a green light suddenly appeared on his body. Swoosh! In the next instant, Qin Wukong's figure disappeared. On the stone platform, a series of afterimages appeared. This was a terrifying speed-type divine skill. When it was used, the sky was filled with afterimages, and the speed was astonishing. With Lu Ming's current eyesight, it was very difficult for an ordinary speed to leave an afterimage in his eyes. To be able to leave an afterimage under his current eyesight, it could be seen how fast the speed was. It was faster than Lu Ming's eyesight. Speed Divine Skill Level 8. Lu Ming muttered. He could tell that Qin Yukong was using a speed-type divine skill, but it had already reached the 8th level. Under Divine King, being able to cultivate a divine skill to the 8th level was already extremely impressive. For example, the Qin clan's prodigy and Jin Ju had only cultivated their divine skills to the 7th level. 7 Wounds Divine Fist. Qin Yukong's voice rang out once again. Then, from all directions, numerous fist imprints blasted towards Lu Ming, completely enveloping Lu Ming. Using a speed-type divine skill together with the 7 Wounds Divine Fist to seal off all paths of retreat, the power increased exponentially. In an instant, dozens of fist imprints blasted towards Lu Ming. Level 8 of a speed-type divine skill. You think you're the only one who has it? Lu Ming muttered. On his body, divine power surged and condensed into a Kuan Peng. This Kuan Peng was very small, only slightly bigger than Lu Ming. The Kuan Peng flapped its wings, and Lu Ming's figure disappeared from the spot. In the eyes of others, Lu Ming had also turned into afterimages, shuttling through the numerous fist imprints. His speed was not any slower than Qin Yukong's. Lu Ming's 9 Heavens Kuan Peng technique had also reached the 8th level. The 9 Heavens Kuan Peng technique was originally known for its speed and long-distance flight, but now it was being used by Lu Ming for short-distance movement. Its power was also extremely strong, completely avoiding Qin Yukong's fist imprints. This kid's speed-type divine skill has also reached the 8th level. Damn it! Qin Yukong roared in his heart. He was truly shocked. Swoosh! His body suddenly stopped, and he retracted his fist imprints, gathering them together and rushing towards Lu Ming. In the process of rushing out, Qin Yukong opened his mouth and let out a long roar. A terrifying vibration came from his mouth. The air above Qin Yukong's mouth vibrated with visible vibrations. In the end, it turned into battle swords and slashed towards Lu Ming. Clang! Clang! Lu Ming waved his long spear to block. The battle sword slashed on the long spear, causing the long spear to vibrate continuously. Lu Ming's body trembled slightly, and he took a few steps back. What a powerful divine skill! Level 8 of a speed-type divine skill. Lu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. Qin Yukong was indeed powerful. No wonder he was so confident. Not only had he cultivated a speed-type divine skill to the 8th level, but he had also cultivated a speed-type divine skill to the 8th level. The 8th level of a speed-type divine skill had already surpassed the 7 Wounds Divine Fist in terms of power. Die! Qin Yukong hollered. He opened his mouth and let out a long whistle. The air vibrated and formed many combat swords, slashing toward Lu Ming. Divine Dragon Dharma Idol. Lu Ming shouted and stepped forward. 9-clawed Dragon Dharma Idol condensed one after another, a total of 7 dragons. They roared and pounced towards Qin Yukong, clashing with his battle swords. Boom! 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 The sounds of explosions continued. The 9-clawed Dragon Dharma idols were no match for Qin Yukong. They trembled violently, and finally they were split into 2. However, Lu Ming used the ice shackles. The 9 ice shackles danced in the air like long snakes. Qin Yukong's battle sword slashed against the ice shackles, emitting a clanging sound. However, the ice shackles did not break apart, and the sword was blocked by the ice shackles. How is this possible? Qin Yukong was shocked. His attack-type divine skill was known for its attacking power. Moreover, he had cultivated it to the 8th level. In addition to the divine power that was at 99% awakened, its power was shocking and its destructive power was extremely strong. However, Lu Ming had blocked it. Void Splitter! Lu Ming took the opportunity to launch an attack. A spear light shot out, piercing towards Qin Yukong. Qin Yukong was shocked. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. He could only barely avoid being hit in his vitals. Half of his body almost exploded, and blood and flesh splattered everywhere. It was a tragic sight. Lu Ming, I want you dead. Qin Yukong's eyes were blood red. His body emitted an even more terrifying aura. Boom! Qin Yukong punched out 2 consecutive times. The 2 fist imprints merged into one, emitting a dazzling blood-red light. It rushed towards Lu Ming, and its power was shocking. The power has increased by a level. It is said that the 7 wounds divine fist of the Qin clan is more powerful the more injured one is. So it is true. Lu Ming's mind raced. He had injured Qin Yukong just now, and it had allowed Qin Yukong to push the power of the 7 wounds divine fist to the maximum. Let's see how long you can last. Lu Ming's eyes were cold. He did not believe that if he beat Qin Yukong half to death, Qin Yukong would still be able to use his full strength. Shwa! Shwa! 9 ice shackles danced in the air, revolving in front of Qin Yukong, forming a defensive wall. Chapter 30:24. Boom! Qin Yukong's 7 injuring fist landed on the defensive wall formed by the ice chains. The ice chains shook violently, but in the end they managed to withstand the attack and did not break. Even so, there was still a terrifying force that surged towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming's figure retreated continuously. However, after Lu Ming retreated a few steps, he took a step forward and his figure soared into the sky. Then he stabbed his spear from above. Void piercing, void piercing. In an instant, Lu Ming executed more than 10 moves of void piercing. More than 10 spear rays fell like stars, bombarding Qin Yukong. Qin Yukong was helpless and could only continue to attack with his fists. However, although the 7 injuring fist was stronger when one was injured, there was a drawback, which was that it would worsen the injury. If he could not defeat his opponent in a short period of time, his injuries would only worsen. Just like this, Lu Ming and Qin Yukong continued to fight, exchanging more than 10 moves. It had to be said that Qin Yukong was a terrifying opponent. His talent was extremely strong. No matter if it was divine skills, secret techniques, or divine force, they were all not weak. If his divine force was fully awakened, he would definitely be able to pass the gate of heaven. Moreover, the 7 injuring fist was stronger when one was injured. Lu Ming had used almost all of his techniques, but he still could not defeat Qin Yukong in a short period of time. However, after such a long battle, Qin Yukong's injuries were getting worse and worse. The power of the 7 injuring fist began to weaken. The 7 injuring fist was not heaven-defying. When one's injuries reached a certain extent, the power would not increase, but instead weaken. Puff! After exchanging another move with Lu Ming, Qin Yukong's body trembled and he vomited blood. His face was extremely pale. Damn it! Qin Yukong roared. Gritting his teeth, his figure suddenly retreated. In an instant, he was out of the range of the stone stage. He directly admitted defeat. Why don't you dare to fight? Didn't you want to kill me? You want to leave before the victor is decided? Lu Ming's mocking voice sounded. Qin Yukong gritted his teeth. His eyes were filled with crazy killing intent, but he did not speak. He took out a healing pill and swallowed it, using all his strength to heal his injuries. Qin Yukong actually lost. Many people muttered softly. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they simply wouldn't believe it. Qin Yukong was actually defeated by a 5th-level heavenly god. Qin Yukong, under the God King realm, was definitely in existence at the peak, other than a few geniuses who had awakened the origin source divine force. He was practically an invincible character. Such a character was actually defeated in the hands of a 5th-level heavenly god. This Lu Ming is so scary. It's indeed terrifying. If his cultivation level was higher, he would have reached the half-step divine king realm. No, as long as he reached the 9th heavenly god realm, no one below the divine king realm would be his match. Many people exclaimed in surprise, Jin Xing, Qin Yukong, and the rest's faces turned even uglier. Hee hee. On the stone platform, Lu Ming glanced at Qin Yukong and the rest before turning around. However, he didn't sit down. Instead, his gaze shifted towards the 3 stone platforms in the first row. Many people were shocked. Could it be that Lu Ming wanted to challenge the people in the first row? With his strength, he might really succeed, someone said. Many people nodded in agreement. Indeed, other than the genius who had awakened the origin source divine force, the other 2 might not be as strong as Qin Yukong. Since Lu Ming could defeat Qin Yukong, it didn't mean that he couldn't defeat the other 2 and obtain a seat. Many people's eyes lit up, anticipating another peak battle. Lu Ming was indeed going to challenge the people in the first row. In this place, one could only cultivate for 3 years. Lu Ming had already cultivated for 9 months. Time was precious. In the remaining time, Lu Ming naturally wanted to cultivate in the best position. Lu Ming swallowed a few divine pills to refine the medicinal energy and recover. This wait lasted for 5 days. At this moment, on the first row, a young man emitted a radiant light. It's him, Su Yan. Many people were shocked. This person was the genius who had awakened the origin source divine force. His name was Su Yan. Lu Ming definitely won't challenge Su Yan. Many people shook their heads. Indeed, Lu Ming didn't intend to challenge Su Yan. With his current strength, he wasn't Su Yan's opponent. Su Yan opened his eyes and stood up. He frowned and said, "What a pity." With a low sigh, Su Yan stepped out and left the stone platform. He turned into a beam of light and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Su Yan left? Seems like he has been cultivating here for 3 years. 3 years is up. There's no point in staying here. Looking at his expression, his origin source divine force shouldn't have awakened a second time. Nonsense! How could it be so easy to awaken origin source divine force a second time? Every time origin source divine force is awakened, the difficulty is 10 times higher than the previous one. Those below the divine king realm who can awaken their origin source divine force a first time are already geniuses among geniuses. It's impossible to awaken a second time. After seeing Su Yan leave, many people started discussing. He actually left. That will save me some trouble. Lu Ming smiled. He took a step forward and appeared on the stone platform where Su Yan was. Lu Ming really went up. Many people shook their heads. Lu Ming stepped onto the stone platform in the first row. No one dared to challenge him. What a joke. Even Qin Yukong had been defeated. Without awakened origin source divine force, going up was just asking for humiliation. However, there were many people who competed for Lu Ming's position. After a round of fighting, that stone platform was occupied by one person. As for Lu Ming, no one dared to challenge him. After a day, a screen of light enveloped Lu Ming. Lu Ming sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. It was still the same starry sky, and the primordial divine spirits were still fighting. However, the feeling it gave off was much clearer. Soon, Lu Ming found the sovereign divine force's origin source divine force and began to comprehend it. Whoosh! A strand of sovereign divine force's origin source divine force flew toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming did not take it seriously at first. However, in the next moment, his expression changed. This was because when this strand of sovereign divine force flew over, it actually split into dozens of strands. Then, each strand of sovereign divine force transformed into a figure that charged toward Lu Ming. Cold killing intent and ear-piercing energy. Everything was so real. Lu Ming instinctively blocked. 9 ice chains flew out and blocked in front of him. Boom! Boom! The sovereign divine force's origin source divine force transformed into dozens of figures and attacked the ice chains. The ice chains shook continuously. Lu Ming felt as if he had been hit by a planet. His body was pushed back and his blood boiled. He spat out a mouthful of blood. It's real. It's real. It has offensive power. Lu Ming's expression turned serious. This attack was not illusory. It was real. Come at me then. Lu Ming revealed a strong fighting spirit. With a thought, he wanted to use the ancient god body. However, he realized that he could not use it at all. He wanted to activate the battle formula, but it was useless. It seems like I can only rely on my divine force and divine skill to fight, Lu Ming muttered. A long spear condensed in his hand and charged forward. Chapter 30:25. Lu Ming thrust his spear forward while the figure formed by the divine power of origin threw a punch forward. Their attacks collided with each other. Boom! There was a loud bang and Lu Ming's body swayed slightly. That figure was sent flying out from the impact. This kind of fluctuation. Lu Ming was not shocked. Instead, his eyes lit up. In the previous exchange, Lu Ming could clearly feel that his opponent was formed by the sovereign's origin divine power. In the collision, Lu Ming could clearly feel the profoundness of the origin divine power. No wonder. Is this the function of the first row of stone platforms? Lu Ming's face lit up with joy. The first row of stone platforms was a direct confrontation with the corresponding origin divine power. This way, the effect would be much better. Previously, he had only been watching. Now that he was fighting, the effect was naturally different. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, figures were rushing over from all directions. Come! Come! Lu Ming was excited. He waved his spear and charged forward. In this kind of battle, not only could he experience the origin divine power, but he could also practice various divine skills and secret techniques. This was Lu Ming's favorite method. Lu Ming was also fighting with dozens of figures formed by origin divine power. In the beginning, Lu Ming was no match for them. It was fortunate that any injuries sustained here could be healed very quickly, and they would not be harmed in any way. Just like that, Lu Ming focused on cultivating. Outside the stone platform, among the crowd, Jin Xing, Qin Yukong, and the rest were staring coldly at Lu Ming, who was cultivating. What should we do? Are we going to let this kid continue to be free? One of the Qin family members gritted his teeth. Now, in Star Moon Ancient City, only Brother Jin Yuan from the Jin clan and Qin clan can kill this kid, Qin Yukong said. That's right. You guys wait here. I'll go find cousin Jin Yuan and ask him to kill Lu Ming. Jin Xing gritted his teeth. But Brother Jin Yuan, haven't you been cultivating for 3 years? You can't continue to challenge him. One of the Qin clan's Sky Pride said. It doesn't matter if we can't challenge him. We can wait outside. When the 3 years are up, that brat will naturally come down. At that time, we can just kill him. Jin Xing said coldly. Good idea, let's do that. We'll keep an eye here. Brother Jin Yuan. We'll have to trouble Brother Jin Xing. Qin Yukong said. All right, wait for my good news. After Jin Xing finished speaking, his figure flashed and he left this place. Time flew by day. People from the vicinity of the Myriad God Cliff came and left every day. Come and go and come again. However, when many people saw Lu Ming in the first row, they were very surprised. Isn't that Lu Ming? I remember that he's only a level 4 celestial deity cultivation, right? He can actually sit in the first row. Someone was curious. Not the 4th layer Heaven God Realm, but the 5th layer Heaven God Realm. On top of that, his strength is extremely terrifying. It's impossible to judge his strength with ordinary standards. The person who had seen Lu Ming fight before said, He, extremely terrifying? How ridiculous! How terrifying can a 5th layer Heaven God Realm cultivator be? In my opinion, it's you bunch of trash that let a 5th layer Heaven God Realm cultivator take the throne in the first row. A young man in a golden robe said with a mocking grin. Many people wore unpleasant looks. The young man in a golden robe scolded everyone who had seen Lu Ming fight before, including Qin Yukong. Does that mean you're going to challenge him? Someone said. Of course, the throne in the first row is mine. The young man in a golden robe said with a confident smile. "Oh." The others uttered an "oh," but did not say anything. Since the young man in a golden robe had scolded them, they would not say anything to remind the young man. Soon, Lu Ming had cultivated for 3 months. The light barrier on his body flickered as Lu Ming opened his eyes. 98% as expected. The further I go, the slower it is to improve, Lu Ming murmured. After 3 months of cultivation, Lu Ming's ruler god force had been awakened to 98%. The effect of the first row was outstanding, but the difficulty of the second row was also increasing. If he were to cultivate in the lower rows, his ruler god force would not be able to reach 98%. I've cultivated for a year. 2 more years should be enough for me to awaken. Lu Ming wore a faint smile. At that instant, he suddenly felt a powerful aura crushing down on him. Following it, he saw a young man in a golden robe landing in front of him. "You're challenging me?" Lu Ming asked with a slight surprise. He initially thought no one would dare to challenge him after defeating Qin Yukong. He did not expect someone to be so stubborn. "Nonsense. It's your fortune that you were able to cultivate in the first row when I wasn't around. Now get out of my sight." The young man in a golden robe snapped. A powerful aura burst out from his body in an extremely arrogant manner. Half-step divine king realm. This young man in a golden robe was not weak. He had reached the half-step divine king realm. No wonder he was so confident. However, his ruler god force was not fully awakened. It was only around 50%, a far cry from Qin Yukong. Outside, many people had mocking smiles on their faces, waiting to watch a good show. This person wanted to challenge Lu Ming. Wasn't he looking for trouble? However, this person was too arrogant. No one warned him. "Is that so?" Lu Ming muttered under his breath. Suddenly he shouted, "Get out of my sight!" A powerful aura burst out from his body, rushing towards the young man in a golden robe. The young man in a golden robe's face darkened, and he said, "Lu Ming, don't think that you can be arrogant in front of me just because you have some talent. Now is not the time for you to be arrogant. I have given you a chance, but you didn't want to get out of my sight. I can only make you get out of my sight." Having said that, the young man in a golden robe moved, rushing towards Lu Ming and launching a fierce attack. Roar! Lu Ming let out the roar of an ancient god. His body quickly enlarged, transforming into an ancient god body. Then he swept out his spear. Boom! 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 The long spear crushed the young man in a golden robe's attack. The terrifying spear radiance continued towards the young man in a golden robe. How can this be? The young man in a golden robe roared, his face filled with disbelief. He then used all his strength to defend himself. However, when the long spear struck him, the young man in a golden robe screamed in pain. All of his defenses were shattered in an instant, and the young man in a golden robe was sent flying by the long spear. However, before he could fly out of the stone platform, a few ice chains flew over and entangled the young man in a golden robe. Then they swung the young man in a golden robe and flung him towards the stone platform. Bam! 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 The young man in a golden robe was constantly smashed on the stone platform. Moreover, Lu Ming deliberately controlled it. Every time, the young man in a golden robe was smashed on the stone platform. The young man in a golden robe screamed continuously. His teeth and blood flew out, and his face was smashed beyond recognition. It was a horrible sight. Who asked you to be arrogant? You deserve it. Many people muttered, but they still felt chills down their spines. Lu Ming was too violent. Chapter 30:26. From the beginning to the end, the golden-robed young man was suppressed by Lu Ming. Although the golden-robed young man was a half-step god king, his god force had only awakened to 50%. Moreover, his divine skill was only at the 7th level. His battle prowess was far inferior to Qin Yukong's. Moreover, in these few months, Lu Ming's sovereign god force had also awakened to a higher degree. His battle prowess had also increased. Naturally, it was easy for him to deal with the golden-robed young man. After a dozen strikes, Lu Ming controlled the ice chains and flung the golden-robed young man away. The golden-robed young man barely managed to stabilize himself in the air as he looked at Lu Ming in horror. I already told you to scram, but you chose to stay and be tortured. Why bother? Why bother? Lu Ming's voice rang out. The golden-robed young man was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood. He executed his movement technique and left without looking back. He did not even bother to compete for the other stone stages. He was too ashamed. After torturing the golden-robed young man, Lu Ming continued to sit cross-legged and waited. A day later, a layer of light enveloped Lu Ming. Lu Ming continued to cultivate. Time passed quickly. Another 3 months passed. In these 3 months, Lu Ming's sovereign god force had awakened to 99%. However, after reaching 99%, it stopped. After reaching 99%, the next step was to completely awaken the quintessence god force. However, this step was extremely difficult. The difference of a single step was like heaven and earth. Many people were stuck at this step for their entire lives. It was not easy for Lu Ming to break through. Continue to cultivate. I don't believe that I can't break through. Lu Ming pondered. After a day, he continued to cultivate. This time, no one challenged Lu Ming. In the blink of an eye, another 3 months passed. Lu Ming had been cultivating here for a year and a half. After 3 months of cultivation, Lu Ming's comprehension of the sovereign god force had deepened. However, his awakening was still at 99%. He continued to cultivate. After that, no one challenged Lu Ming. 3 months passed. Another 3 months passed. Finally, after cultivating here for 2 years, Lu Ming finally broke through. The sovereign's god power had finally awakened the quintessence god power. Once the divine power origin factor was awakened, the divine power seemed to have undergone a qualitative change. The divine power was filled with a peculiar factor that made the divine power's power incomparably terrifying. If the sovereign's divinity from before could be described as rotten wood, then the current sovereign's divinity was akin to steel. He had become much stronger. Lu Ming sensed it carefully and was overjoyed. It was no wonder that the prodigies who had awakened divine origin power had such terrifying battle prowess. For example, Lan Ling's battle prowess was so strong that she could definitely suppress a divine king like the Dark Knight Devil King. With my current strength, defeating Qin Mukong should be a piece of cake. I should be able to suppress a divine king like the Dark Knight Devil King. Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. The 3-month period was up again. Lu Ming opened his eyes, feeling refreshed. At this moment, he felt his back twitch slightly. A cold killing intent enveloped him. Previously, he had also been enveloped by killing intent, but Lu Ming did not have much of a reaction. That was because the owner of the killing intent was not a threat to him. However, this time, Lu Ming's body naturally reacted. This meant that the owner of the killing intent was a threat to him. Lu Ming turned his head to look. Jin Yuan. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. He saw Jin Xing, Jin Yuan, and the others outside the stone platform. The killing intent that made his body tense was emitted by Jin Yuan. Lu Ming, very good. You dare to kill a prodigy of my Jin clan? Very good. Jin Yuan said coldly when he saw Lu Ming looking over. He did not conceal his cold killing intent. Beside him, many people stayed far away from Jin Yuan. Jin Yuan was an existence who had awakened the quintessence god power. His strength was terrifying. No one could stop him if he went berserk. The trash of the Jin clan even invited you here. However, I don't have time to fight with you now. Lu Ming said indifferently. He still had a year's time. After saying that, Lu Ming turned his head away and no longer paid attention to Jin Yuan. The 3-year period will be over soon. If you don't dare to come out now, let's see how you can hide when the 3-year period is up. I'll wait for you here. Jin Yuan said coldly, "Up to you." After Lu Ming said that, he did not say anything else. This made Jin Yuan's gaze even colder. Lu Ming is going to be in danger. I didn't expect Jin Xing to invite Jin Yuan here. It's indeed dangerous. Lu Ming should have left earlier. He was too greedy. He wanted to occupy the first row and cultivate for 3 years. Now he's going to put himself in danger. Some people were discussing in low voices. No one thought that Lu Ming could fight with Jin Yuan. Although Lu Ming's strength was strong, there was not much difference between him and Qin Mukong. At most, he was slightly stronger than Qin Mukong. However, Jin Yuan had awakened his origin divine power factor. His battle strength was definitely much stronger than Qin Mukong's. Even if Lu Ming continued to cultivate, he would not be Jin Yuan's match, unless Lu Ming had also awakened his origin divine power factor. However, was that possible? Lu Ming was only a level 5 celestial god. Before coming here, his awakening level would not be high. It was impossible for him to awaken his divine power origin factor within 3 years of cultivation. Every time there were many geniuses who entered Xingyue Ancient City, many people cultivated at Myriad God Cliff. Many people knew the effects of cultivating at Myriad God Cliff. Although the effects were many times better than cultivating outside, it was almost impossible to awaken one's origin divine power factor after cultivating for one time. For people like Jin Yuan who had awakened their origin divine power factor, they had only successfully awakened it after cultivating for a long time after leaving Xingyue Ancient City. It was rare to awaken it after cultivating for one time, let alone Lu Ming, who was only a level 5 celestial god. Without awakening his origin divine power factor, how could he be Jin Yuan's match? Therefore, many people thought that Lu Ming was in danger. Some people had wanted to leave, but now they decided to stay. They wanted to see how Lu Ming, a peerless genius, would end up. Lu Ming was too lazy to think about it. A day later, he entered his cultivation state and entered the starry sky again. Now that I've successfully awakened my sovereign divine power, it's impossible to achieve a breakthrough in a short time if I continue to comprehend it. I should try comprehending other sovereign divine powers. Lu Ming pondered. Awakening one's origin divine power factor was considered the first celestial god. However, it was extremely difficult to reach the second celestial god. It was 10 times harder than the first awakening. It was impossible to achieve a breakthrough in a short time. Therefore, Lu Ming decided to comprehend another type of sovereign divine power. After some consideration, Lu Ming decided to comprehend the inextinguishable sword force. The inextinguishable sword force focused on offense. If he could successfully awaken it, it would greatly enhance Lu Ming's offensive power. Of course, he had to find the origin divine power that corresponded to the inextinguishable sword force first. Lu Ming shuttled through the starry sky, searching for the origin divine power that corresponded to the inextinguishable sword force. Chapter 30:27. Lu Ming was searching for the origin god force of the indestructible sword force. Whoosh! In the boundless space, a sword chi pierced through the cosmos, sweeping through space. Wherever the sword chi passed, planets exploded one after another. Even a few stars were extinguished. Facing the boundless sword chi that pierced through space, Lu Ming was flabbergasted. It took him a long time to react. What a terrifying sword chi! Lu Ming exclaimed. Then his eyes lit up. This was the origin god force of the indestructible sword force. Lu Ming quickly approached and circulated the indestructible sword force. Whoosh! A sword chi slashed at Lu Ming. That kind of aura almost caused Lu Ming's mental state to collapse. He roared, and Lu Ming finally calmed himself down. Clang! Clang! Sword hums resounded as the sword chi split into more than a dozen streaks, turning into more than a dozen immortal sword lights that slashed at Lu Ming. Come! Lu Ming's battle intent surged as he raised his spear to meet the incoming sword lights. This sword light was similar to the origin God force of the sovereign realm. It could help him comprehend the origin God force faster. Just like that, 3 months passed. Lu Ming's understanding of the indestructible sword force improved rapidly, especially in the early stages. The speed of improvement was even faster. 9 months later, Lu Ming had awakened the indestructible sword force to 99%. However, it was extremely difficult to break through at this point. After that, Lu Ming spent another 3 months, but he still failed to break through and awaken the origin God force. Unfortunately, there's no more time. On the stone stage, Lu Ming opened his eyes and sighed softly. 3 years had passed. If Lu Ming was given another half a year, Lu Ming was confident that he could awaken the origin God force of the indestructible sword force. But now he was still lacking a little bit. When the light screen on Lu Ming's body disappeared, a cold, murderous intent shrouded Lu Ming. Lu Ming, the 3 years are up. Let's see how you'll die. A cold voice came from behind. Lu Ming didn't need to look to know that it was Jin Yuan. Lu Ming turned around and saw several eyes filled with killing, intense staring at Lu Ming. In the last year, Jin Yuan and the others had been guarding the stone stage to prevent Lu Ming from secretly escaping. The 3 years are up. What will Lu Ming do? Many people had the same thought. They stared at Lu Ming, wondering what he would do. How? Do you think you can kill me? Lu Ming smiled faintly. He then got up and took a step forward. He left the stone platform and walked toward Jin Yuan. Many people were stunned. Lu Ming actually walked out like that. His attitude was so arrogant, as if he did not take Jin Yuan seriously at all. If you want to fight, come up and fight. Lu Ming took a step forward and soared into the sky. His body was filled with a strong fighting intent. The others were even more shocked. The result was different from what they had imagined. Lu Ming didn't think of a way to escape or beg for mercy. Instead, he challenged Jin Yuan. Lu Ming is challenging Jin Yuan. With his strength, he'll only die if he challenges Jin Yuan. Could it be that he has awakened the origin divine power factor? Everyone discussed and thought of this possibility. That's impossible. Someone denied it. Lu Ming had only cultivated for 3 years and had already awakened the origin divine power factor. This talent was too monstrous. How could others live with it? Many people chose not to believe it. You want to challenge me? Even Jin Yuan himself was slightly stunned. Then his killing intent intensified. He soared into the sky and stood in front of Lu Ming. Boom! Jin Yuan was shrouded in golden divine power. It was dazzling, and an ancient aura spread out. A gush of terrifying pressure pressed down on Lu Ming like a sacred mountain. Lu Ming, I know your combat strength is not bad. However, you're still far from being able to defeat me. Kneel down. Jin Yuan shouted and pressed his hand in the air. Golden light filled the air and a huge golden palm print was formed. It pressed down on Lu Ming. There was a loud rumbling sound in the sky. Before the palm print pressed down, the violent force had already crushed toward Lu Ming like a violent storm. If it were other 9th-level heavenly gods, or even half-step divine kings, they might not be able to withstand this move. However, Lu Ming's eyes were calm. There was even a trace of anticipation in the depths of his eyes. He was looking forward to fighting with other sky prides who had awakened the origin divine power factor. Boom! A terrifying aura also erupted from Lu Ming's body. It was filled with an ancient aura. Then, a spear light soared into the sky and pierced through the clouds. The huge spear light and Jin Yuan's palm print collided, creating a violent wave of energy that swept out in all directions. Dazzling light illuminated the sky as if a planet had exploded. In the next moment, the spear light and palm print disappeared at the same time. Lu Ming stood in the sky, motionless. Everyone was dumbfounded. It took a while for someone to react. Origin divine power factor. Oh my God, it's the origin divine power factor. Lu Ming has also awakened the origin divine power factor. He has really awakened the origin divine power factor. This is impossible. How is this possible? Evildoer, evildoer. Many people shouted excitedly. They couldn't help themselves. They never expected that Lu Ming had also awakened the origin divine power factor. He had only cultivated for 3 years and was only a 5th-level heavenly god. Impossible, 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 Jin Xing screamed in his heart. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He had fought with Lu Ming in the Qin Tian Star Zone. But now he hadn't improved much, while Lu Ming had already awakened the origin divine power factor. He was known as one of the 4 heroes of the Jin family. He had always been confident in his talent. But compared to Lu Ming, his talent was trash. Jin Yuan was also extremely shocked. He looked at Lu Ming with a horrified expression. It was rare to awaken the origin divine power factor at the 5th-level heavenly god realm. Jin Yuan had only heard of such a heaven-defying talent in the core region of the Taishu dynasty. One should know that the higher the cultivation, the stronger the divine power, and the deeper the understanding of the divine power, it would be easier to awaken the origin divine power factor. The lower the cultivation, the harder it would be. In the star camp, those who had awakened the origin divine power factor below the divine king realm were peerless talents. But most of them were only at the half-step divine king realm. There were very few 9th-level heavenly gods who had awakened in history, not to mention 5th-level heavenly gods. Is it that great to have awakened the origin divine power factor? Lu Ming said faintly. His words were in response to Jin Yuan's words. Jin Yuan acted like he was great just now, looking down on those who hadn't awakened the origin divine power factor. Lu Ming's words made Jin Yuan's face turn gloomy. You're just a 5th-level heavenly god. Even if you've awakened the origin divine power, your power is limited. Today I'll kill you, Jin Yuan shouted. The murderous intent on his body became more intense. The more talented Lu Ming was, the more he wanted to kill him. Boom! Jin Yuan stepped out and slashed at Lu Ming with his hand like a knife. Void-shattering hand. Chapter 3028. Previously, Jin Yuan had only attacked casually, but now he was serious as he used the void-severing hand. The void-severing hand was said to be able to sever the void under the activation of the origin divine force factor. Its power was extremely strong. It was not something that Jin Ju or Jin Xing could compare to. Lu Ming's eyes turned solemn. Ancient god body. Lu Ming immediately used the ancient god body and turned into a green-armored ancient god. He then stabbed his spear at Jin Yuan. Dong! It was as if 2 planets had collided. The void began to tremble like boiling water. Berserk energy surged out in all directions like a vast ocean, creating loud rumbling sounds. Lu Ming felt a terrifying force rushing towards him along the long spear. He could not help but retreat. However, Jin Xing was not any better. His body also drifted back. Die. Jin Yuan retreated, stepped into the void, and charged toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming roared and charged forward with his spear. The 2 of them fought fiercely. In terms of body size, Lu Ming was much bigger than Jin Yuan. However, Jin Yuan's strength was not any weaker than Lu Ming's. Boom! Boom! The 2 of them exchanged more than 10 blows, but there was no clear winner. Damn it! Why is this kid's divine force so strong? Jin Yuan roared in his heart. Both of them had awakened the origin divine force factor, but he was a half-step divine king. On the other hand, Lu Ming was only a level 5 heavenly god. Indeed, although Lu Ming had mastered many kinds of divine powers, only one of them had awakened the origin divine power factor. Moreover, his cultivation level was only at the 5th level celestial god realm. He could not compete with Jin Yuan with just 1 sovereign divine power. However, he had other divine forces, especially the undying sword force, which had reached 99%. This made up for the gap between them. Moreover, The battle character secret art had triggered 4 times his combat strength. That was why he could compete with Jin Yuan. Void severing sword, slash! Jin Yuan roared. His glabella shone, and a golden battle sword flew out, slashing towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming had seen Jin Xing use this move before, so he wasn't surprised. He had already prepared for it. Dragon roars resounded as 10,000 meters long 9-clawed dragon condensed above Lu Ming's head. There were 7 of them in total, and they charged toward Gold Ingot. However, after the 7th 9-clawed dragon, 2 more 9-clawed dragons appeared, making a total of 9. After this period of cultivation, especially in the Myriad God Cliff, where he fought against the figures formed by the divine power of origin, Lu Ming's mystical dragon aspect art had made another breakthrough. He was now able to form 9 mystical dragon aspects at once. On top of that, the divine dragon aspect art was even more terrifying now that he had awakened the sovereign realm's origin god force. The 9 divine dragon dermas continued to attack Jin Yuan. Jin Yuan controlled the space-breaking sword to slash at the divine dragon dermas. Boom! Boom! Terrifying collisions continued to take place as the 9 9-clawed dragons clashed with the space-severing sword. Ice chains! Immediately after, Lu Ming used the ice chains to attack Jin Yuan. Jin Yuan quickly used the space-severing hand to block, but Lu Ming held his spear and charged at Jin Yuan. Lu Ming used all his moves and forced Jin Yuan to retreat. Jin Yuan was at a disadvantage. The others were shocked. Was Jin Yuan going to lose today? This was a big deal. You want to defeat me? Impossible. Space-severing sword, 9 swords attack. Jin Yuan roared. His entire body suddenly emitted a dazzling light. The space between his eyebrows was like a small sun. Clang! 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 A series of sword cries rang out as golden battle swords shot out from between Jin Yuan's eyebrows. There were 8 swords in total, including the previous one. There were 9 swords in total. Whoosh! 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 The golden space-severing sword continuously slashed out. The sword light whistled, and its power was shocking. Lu Ming's expression changed. He continuously swung his spear to block the golden swords. Clang! 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 The golden swords continuously slashed the spear. The spear vibrated violently, and the terrifying space-severing force flowed along the spear and spread to Lu Ming's body. Cracks appeared on the green scales on Lu Ming's body, and blood seeped out. Moreover, cracks appeared on the spear in Lu Ming's hand. What a shocking power! Lu Ming frowned. His spear was a superior level, 9 divine artifact, but it could not block the power of his opponent. Kill! Jin Yuan roared. He controlled the space-severing sword and continued to slash at Lu Ming. He wanted to kill Lu Ming in one go. Ice chain! Lu Ming controlled the ice chain to fly back and shroud himself. Clang! Clang! The space-severing sword slashed at the ice chain, producing a clang and sparks. However, the ice chain was not damaged at all. Only a few marks appeared on it. It's so hard! Jin Yuan's eyes narrowed. He was shocked. The space-severing sword was said to be able to sever the void, and its destructive power was astonishing. In addition, there were 8 swords attacking at the same time. Its power was even more terrifying, but it could not cut through Lu Ming's ice chain. I don't believe it. Slash, slash, slash. Jin Yuan roared. He controlled the space-severing sword and slashed at Lu Ming crazily. However, in the end, the ice chain blocked all the attacks. Although Lu Ming was pushed back by the powerful impact, Jin Yuan could not hurt him at all. In the end, Jin Yuan even used the space-severing hand, but it was useless. Lu Ming hid in the ice chain and found time to counterattack. He attacked Jin Yuan with spear radiance. Lu Ming, what's the point of hiding in there? Fight me if you dare! Jin Yuan roared. This is my secret skill, a defensive secret skill. Is it not considered strength? Ridiculous! Lu Ming said disdainfully. Jin Yuan gritted his teeth. He was speechless. Indeed, this was Lu Ming's secret skill. It did not rely on any treasure. Whether it was an offensive secret skill, a defensive secret skill, or a speed secret skill, they were all part of one's strength. Humph! Don't think that I can't break your defense. Jin Yuan's face was fierce. At this time, the 9 space-severing swords all flew back into Jin Yuan's body and merged with his body. The golden radiance on Jin Yuan's body became stronger. In the end, he turned into a golden battle sword and slashed at Lu Ming. Swoosh! The golden sword radiance illuminated the sky as if it was going to split the sky in half. The sword chi whistled and was extremely terrifying. What a powerful force! Block it! Lu Ming narrowed his eyes. This should be Jin Yuan's strongest attack. Lu Ming controlled the 9 ice chain with all his strength. His divine power flowed continuously into the ice chain. Boom! Finally, the battle sword formed by Jin Yuan slashed at the ice chain. The ice chain shook violently. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. The ice chain broke one by one. After a few breaths, all 9 ice chain broke. Then, the golden sword radiance slashed at Lu Ming's body. However, Lu Ming's body was protected by the 9 layers of crimson gold armor. Even so, the 9 layers of crimson gold armor could not block the golden sword radiance. Chapter 30:29. The golden battle sword struck the 9 layers of crimson gold armor. The 9 layers of crimson gold armor could not withstand the attack and was penetrated by the sword radiance. The sword radiance struck Lu Ming's body. Fortunately, the power of the sword radiance had been reduced by 90% after being blocked by the ice chains and the 9 layers of crimson gold armor. When it struck Lu Ming's body, only 10% of its power was left. Slash! A sword wound that was more than 10 meters long appeared on Lu Ming's body. Lu Ming quickly retreated. However, the sword wound was only a superficial one. Lu Ming's injury was not serious. With his strong vitality, he recovered quickly. Not far away, Gold Ingot reappeared. His aura was a little weak. It was obvious that the move had consumed a lot of his energy. Ha ha ha! I've finally broken through your defense. Now, let's see what you're going to use to block my attack. Jin Yuan laughed. So what if it's broken? Idiot! This is a secret technique, not a treasure. Can't I reform it after it's broken? Lu Ming's indifferent voice was heard. Then, with a thought, the 9 ice chains flew out and surrounded him. Jin Yuan almost vomited blood. Now it's my turn. A cold light flashed in Lu Ming's eyes. The aura on his body surged. Previously, he had let Gold Ingot attack because he wanted to see Gold Ingot's strongest killing move. He also wanted to test the defensive power of the ice chains. He had other means to fight against Jin Yuan. Third strike of extinction, star explosion, Lu Ming said in a low voice. Then, a huge spear radiance blasted toward Jin Yuan. Jin Yuan's face changed. He felt a fatal danger. Golden light shone from his body as a golden battle sword appeared on his body and covered his entire body. Hand of the Void! Jin Yuan shouted. He activated the Hand of the Void with all his might and slashed out. Boom! The golden palm struck the huge spear radiance. However, the moment the two collided, the spear radiance shattered like a star exploding. A terrifying destructive force swept toward Jin Yuan. Jin Yuan's body shook violently. He was sent flying by the powerful force. He flew for tens of thousands of meters before he could stabilize himself. At that moment, cracks had appeared on the golden battle sword on his body. Blood was constantly seeping out from the cracks. His hand was also trembling nonstop. Gold Ingot was injured by the star shatter. Damn it, damn it, damn it! Jin Yuan stared at Lu Ming and roared furiously. His expression was extremely ferocious, like a wild beast that had gone mad. Jin Yuan's attack. Jin Yuan's Jin Yuan. An eye for an eye? Lu Ming's Lu Ming. You can only use this kind of ultimate move once at most. I don't believe that you can keep using it, Metal Origin said. Just like his previous move, although the power was extremely terrifying, the consumption of his body was also very shocking. After using that move, he had consumed a lot of his divine power. Is that so? Then open your eyes and watch. Star explosion. Lu Ming let out a long howl and his aura erupted. Another huge spear, gleam, charged toward Jin Yuan. Boom! The spear radiance exploded. The destructive force sent Jin Yuan flying again. This time, Jin Yuan was more seriously injured. More cracks appeared on his golden battle armor. Jin Yuan was about to roar, but Lu Ming attacked again. Another spear radiance rushed toward Jin Yuan. Indeed, the star explosion consumed a shocking amount of divine power. One move would drain all of Lu Ming's divine power. However, Lu Ming had the measure word formula. Why would he be afraid of being drained of divine power? As long as Lu Ming was free, he would inject divine power into the measure formula and store it. Therefore, Lu Ming's star explosion could be used continuously. How is this possible? Jin Yuan roared. He found it hard to accept. Then he turned and ran. He was really scared. Lu Ming could use this kind of ultimate move continuously. Under the bombardment of such ultimate moves, if he did not run, he would be exhausted to death sooner or later. Swoosh! Jin Yuan turned into a golden radiance and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lu Ming didn't give chase. Jin Yuan was indeed very strong. Lu Ming had the upper hand by relying on the star explosion and the ice shackles. However, if Jin Yuan was determined to escape, he wouldn't be able to stop him. Lu Ming's gaze swept toward Jin Xing, Qin Yukong, and the rest. Jin Xing, Qin Yukong, and the rest's faces paled without a trace of blood. They never thought that one of the four heroes of the Jin clan, Jin Yuan, who had awakened the origin divine power factor, wouldn't be a match for Lu Ming. They were almost scared to death when they saw Lu Ming's gaze. Go! Jin Xing roared. He turned and ran. Qin Yukong and the rest did the same. They didn't dare to stay. Did I give you permission to leave? Lu Ming said coldly. He executed the 9 Heavens Garuda technique and caught up with Jin Xing, Qin Yukong, and the rest in a few flashes. Kill! Lu Ming stabbed his spear at one of the Qin clan's prodigies. That Qin clan's prodigy was in the 9th level heavenly god realm. He was terrified and attacked with all his might. However, he couldn't resist Lu Ming at all. Pooh! The long spear pierced through the Qin clan's prodigy's forehead and killed him. Anyway, Lu Ming had already killed the elites of the Jin family and the Qin family. The Jin family and the Qin family would definitely not let him off. It did not matter if he killed one or a few of them. Naturally, Lu Ming would not let them off. After killing the Qin clan's prodigy, Lu Ming's spear attacked Qin Yukong again. I'll fight you to the death. Qin Yukong roared. He circulated his divine force and injured himself to increase the power of the 7 injuries divine fist. He then punched out with all his might. A brilliant fist energy was sent towards Lu Ming. Sky-piercing. Lu Ming said indifferently. His spear shot out like a meteor. Boom! Lu Ming's long spear pierced through Qin Yukong's fist. The fist trembled slightly before it exploded. It couldn't stop Lu Ming's attack at all. Before Lu Ming's divine force had awakened, Qin Yukong could indeed fight against Lu Ming and exchange many blows with him. However, Lu Ming's sovereign divine force had awakened the divine force. Moreover, the undying sword force had awakened to 99%. His combat strength was a few times stronger than before. Naturally, he could crush Qin Yukong easily. No! Qin Yukong shouted in fear after his fist was destroyed by Lu Ming. He wanted to escape, but it was too late. Pooh! The long spear pierced through and nailed Qin Yukong in the air. No, no, no! Seeing this scene, Jin Xing roared crazily. He was almost scared to death. He used all his strength to escape. However, his speed couldn't be compared to Lu Ming's. Lu Ming caught up with Jin Xing in a few flashes. Lu Ming, you can't kill me. I am one of the 4 prodigies of the Jin clan. If you kill me, the Jin clan won't let you off. Jin Xing roared. Now, he could only use his identity to threaten Lu Ming. Chapter 30:30. Jin family's 4 heroes? Heroes my ass. Lu Ming said coldly. Since he had already offended them, he didn't care who they were. Just kill them. Bam! The long spear swept down, and Jin Xing let out an unwilling scream. His body directly exploded, and both his body and soul were destroyed. Lu Ming waved his hand and kept the storage rings of Jin Xing and the rest. Dead. Jin Xing is dead. Lu Ming is really fearless. This kind of person is the most terrifying. We'd better not offend him. Seeing Jin Xing and the rest being killed, many people kept quiet out of fear and looked at Lu Ming with fear. For the geniuses of the big families, Lu Ming was the most terrifying. He had no scruples at all. No matter who you were, if you offended him, you would be killed. Lu Ming glanced at the crowd nonchalantly. He then turned into a beam of light and left the place. Soon, Lu Ming was far away from Myriad Deity Cliff and landed on a mountain peak. Lu Ming took out a voice transmission jade talisman and sent a message to Autumn Moon. However, the result was the same. The message couldn't be sent out. Sigh. Lu Ming sighed and looked worried. I wonder if Wu Ming and Wu Yu have any news about Autumn Moon. I should send a message. At this thought, Lu Ming sent another message to Wu Ming and the rest to ask about Autumn Moon. The message was sent out, but there was no response. Could it be that Wu Ming and the rest didn't receive the message because it's too far away? Lu Ming thought. In the end, Lu Ming had no choice but to travel while asking about Autumn Moon. In the blink of an eye, a few months had passed. On a flat land, a figure was moving around. He held a long spear in his hand and kept waving it. The long spear was like a divine dragon. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Streaks of spear light burst forth, leaving behind deep pits on the flat ground. Half a day later, the spear aura suddenly changed. The spear aura suddenly expanded, and a resplendent spear aura soared into the sky. It took a long time before it dissipated. I've finally broken through the 3 annihilating strikes, the figure whispered. This figure was naturally Lu Ming. A few months ago, when Lu Ming was traveling around this place, he had been cultivating the 3 strikes of annihilation. While he was comprehending the divine power at the Myriad Gods Cliff, Lu Ming had experienced intense battles in the starry sky. After that, he had fought with Qin Mukong, Jin Yuan, and the others. Lu Ming's comprehension of the 3 annihilating strikes had reached a limit. After this period of comprehension, he had finally broken through to the 8th stage of the Armageddon triple strike. Now that he had broken through to the 8th level of the Armageddon 3 strikes, regardless of whether it was the first move, Space Splitter, the second move, Moon Beheading, or the third move, Exploding Star, their power had all increased by a notch. Now, Lu Ming wouldn't have to fight so hard against Jin Yuan. Lu Ming adjusted his breath and took out a map to have a look. Lu Ming planned to explore another forbidden area to see if he could gain anything. After choosing the right direction, Lu Ming headed west. 2 days later, Lu Ming leaped across a long distance. Boom! Suddenly, a violent explosion came from the right in front of him. A divine power light soared into the sky. There were people fighting there. Lu Ming frowned. Just as he was considering whether to go over and take a look, he saw a few figures flying over quickly. Wu Ming, Wu Yu. Seeing these figures, Lu Ming's eyes lit up. These figures were actually Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and Wu Zixiang. But now they were in an extremely sorry state. Their auras were weak, and their bodies were covered with wounds. Blood was flowing out. They were in a very sorry state. They flew forward with a frightened look on their faces, as if they were escaping from some terrible crisis. Lu Ming didn't hesitate and flew over. In the next moment, Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others also saw Lu Ming. After seeing Lu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others' expressions changed drastically. Lu Ming, don't come over. Go, go, go. Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others shouted anxiously, but Lu Ming was unmoved. He continued to fly towards Wu Ming and the others. Since you've encountered me, you're too naive to think you can leave. Stay here. A cold voice came from behind Wu Ming and the others. Then Lu Ming saw a chariot speeding over. The chariot was huge and dazzling. It wasn't made of ordinary gold. It was made of an extremely precious refining material. The chariot was covered by a curtain, and the situation inside could not be seen clearly. Pulling the chariot were two ferocious wild beasts with wide mouths and sharp fangs. They were roaring continuously. On both sides of the chariot, there were a young man and a young woman. They held long sabers in their arms and looked cold. But what caught Lu Ming's attention was that behind the chariot there was a chain that was pulling a bunch of people. Yes, it was really a bunch of people. There were 12 of them, and all of them were young. However, all of them were severely injured. Their auras were weak, and they were chained up. Their faces were filled with despair. The supreme talents of the interstellar barracks. Lu Ming had some impression of the 12 people chained up. They were the supreme talents of the interstellar barracks. The chariot was extremely fast as it chased after Wu Yu and the others. Lu Ming, go! Wu Zixiong roared and stopped abruptly. He circulated his divine force and pushed out a palm. All of a sudden, war horses formed one after another and charged towards the war chariot like 10,000 galloping horses. Feudal resistance. You're overestimating yourself. On the left side of the chariot, a young man with a saber said coldly. He took a step forward and unsheathed his saber. A terrifying saber radiance shone. Pung, 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 as the saber radiance flashed. The war horses formed by Wu Zixiong were all shattered. The saber radiance did not stop as it slashed towards Wu Zixiong. Wu Zixiong groaned and retreated rapidly. Another wound had appeared on his body and blood was flowing out. Zixiong, are you all right? Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others were shocked. They quickly stopped and helped Wu Zixiong up. If it wasn't for the fact that we wanted to leave some fresh ones, you would be dead. The young man with a saber said coldly, It seems like we won't be able to leave today. Wu Zixiong sighed. The young man with a saber was extremely powerful. Even at his peak, he was no match for him, let alone being injured. Moreover, there were still 3 people who had yet to make a move. The most shocking thing was that the person in the chariot was the real big shot. Whoosh! At this moment, Lu Ming's figure flashed, and he arrived beside Wu Zixiong and the others. Lu Ming, why aren't you leaving? Sai, why aren't you leaving? Wu Ming sighed. He knows his place. He knows that he won't be able to leave. He. The young man with a saber sneered. What's going on? Lu Ming ignored the young man with a saber and asked Wu Ming and the others. Lu Ming, they're from the residence of the 9 Sabers, Heavenly King. Wu Ming said, Residence of the 9 Sabers, Heavenly King. Lu Ming was surprised. Before entering, Bai Li had told them that there were other sky prides from other Heavenly King's mansions who had entered Starry Crescent Ancient City. Including the 9 Sabers' Heavenly King's mansion, there were a total of 4 sky prides from the Heavenly King's mansions who had entered Starry Crescent Ancient City. They had not bumped into any of them previously. Now, they finally bumped into the people from other Heavenly King's mansions. Chapter 3031. Hee. Trash from 9 Extinction Heavenly King Mansion. Surrender obediently lest I take action. The young man sneered coldly. Don't even think about it. Even if we die, we won't fall into your hands. Wu Zixiong roared furiously with a resolute face. Roar! Roar! At that moment, the 2 desolate beasts that were pulling the chariot roared and emitted a strong, murderous aura. Cut the crap! The Li beasts are hungry. At that moment, a cold voice was heard from the war chariot. On both sides of the war chariot, the the 4 young men and women heard the voice, and their faces changed drastically. "Please wait for a moment, young master. I will feed the lee beasts now." The young man with the saber nodded his head and bowed respectfully before walking to the back of the war chariot. "No, no. I beg you, spare me." Behind the war chariot, the young elites who were chained up screamed in horror. Some of them roared while others begged for mercy. "Noisy. The 2 of you are the loudest. So annoying. Just the 2 of you." The young man with the saber extended his hand, and a suction force burst out, forming a big hand that grabbed the 2 of them. "Spare me. Spare me." "No, I don't want to." The 2 young men screamed miserably and struggled frantically. However, these young men seemed to be severely injured and could not break free. The young man with the saber grabbed the 2 young men and returned to the front of the war chariot. With a swing of his hand, the 2 young men flew out. Roar, roar. The 2 desolate beasts roared and opened their bloody mouths. They swallowed the 2 young men and chewed them up. 2 miserable screams came out from the 2 desolate beasts' mouths. Then there was silence. Blood flowed out from the corners of the desolate beasts' mouths. The scene was horrifying. Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the rest had ugly expressions. The remaining young men behind the war chariot were filled with despair. Boom! A cold aura burst out from Lu Ming's body, and it was filled with murderous intent. He finally knew why the young men were chained up behind the war chariot. It turned out that these young men were food for the 2 desolate beasts that were pulling the chariot, using the young elites to feed their own desolate beasts. Cruel, extremely cruel. Even with Lu Ming's temperament, he could not help but reveal a strong murderous intent. Oh, such a strong murderous intent. "You want to kill me? A mere 5th-level celestial god, overestimating himself." The young man sneered at Lu Ming, full of disdain. "Stop talking nonsense. Take them down and find more food for my lee beast. Don't waste time." At this moment, the cold voice sounded from the war chariot again. "Yes, young master. I will take them down immediately." The young man's complexion changed. He quickly bowed and saluted. Then he looked coldly at Lu Ming and the others. Let's go. We'll split up and escape. If we can't escape, we'll self-destruct. We can't fall into their hands." Wu Zixiong roared. They would rather self-destruct and be smashed into pieces than fall into the hands of the saber-wielding young man. If they fell into the hands of the other party, their fates would be incomparably miserable. They would become food for the desolate beasts. "You want to leave? Dream on. Heavenly saber cage." The young man snorted coldly. His aura erupted, and numerous resplendent beams condensed out of thin air. They were incomparably huge, and each of them was 10,000 meters long. They spread out in all directions and enveloped Lu Ming and the others. Crap! Wu Ming and the others were startled. Their path of retreat was blocked. They could not escape even if they wanted to. Self-destruct. Wu Ming sighed. His body emitted a powerful energy. He was going to self-destruct. However, at the next moment, a hand pressed down on Wu Ming's body, suppressing his boiling god force. "Why are you self-destructing? Why don't you just kill these scum?" A calm voice was heard. The person who spoke was none other than Lu Ming. "Ah!" Wu Zixiong, Wu Ming, and the others were startled. Kill them? The young man with the saber had attacked before. His cultivation was at the half-godly emperor realm, and his god force was quite awakened. His strength was outstanding too. Even Wu Zixiong at his peak was no match for him. The other 3 young men had yet to make a move, but their strength was not weak either. The existence on the war chariot was even more unpredictable. How were they going to kill him? It was like hitting a rock with an egg. Ha ha ha, what did I just hear? A 5th layer, heaven god, said he's going to kill us. Did I hear it wrong? The saber-hugging young man laughed out loud. You didn't hear it wrong. He did say that. The other young man also spoke with a disdainful smile on his face. This kid is really stupid. Is the Nine Extinction Heavenly Emperor Palace full of trash like him? The young man with the saber glanced at Lu Ming and said with a mocking smile, "Kid, seeing how stupid you are, I'll send you to the mythical beast first." Saying this, the young man with the saber took a step forward and grabbed at Lu Ming. A giant hand was formed, grabbing at Lu Ming. "Shit!" Lu Ming dodge. "Wu Ming, Wu Yu," and the others were astounded. "Child's play," Lu Ming said calmly and took a step forward too. "Roar." As Lu Ming took a step forward, a dragon's roar could be heard. Following this, a 9-clawed dragon appeared and lunged at the young man's giant hand. Bang! The 9-clawed divine dragon continued to stomp its claws and tore apart the giant hand that the other party had conjured. What? Not only did the young man with the saber take the scene out of his expectation, even Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others were stunned. Lu Ming was actually able to withstand the other party's attack? The young man with the saber was startled, before his eyes flickered with a strong murderous intent. "Kid, so you do have some strength. No wonder you're so confident. However, your strength is nothing in front of me. I'll show you my true strength," the young man with the saber yelled. Meanwhile, a wild aura burst out from his body. That move earlier was just a casual blow from the young man. He had thought that it would be a piece of cake to deal with a 5th-level celestial god. Unexpectedly, Lu Ming's strength was beyond his imagination. He was getting serious now. "Heavenly saber art slash!" The young man with the saber yelled. A terrifying saber glow was fired at Lu Ming. "Roar! Roar!" Lu Ming waved his hand, summoning 9 9-clawed dragons in total. They lunged at the young man. The 9 9-clawed dragons collided with the saber glow. The saber glow shuddered violently before it shattered into pieces. "Kid, you!" The young man with the saber was astounded. He did not expect Lu Ming's strength to be this powerful. Before he could finish his sentence, the 9 godly dragons had already lunged at him. Heavenly saber art, slashing the world. The young man with the saber let out a roar. His saber glow soared into the sky as his aura grew stronger. At that instant, he had unleashed his full strength. He did not dare to conceal his strength. The man was indeed strong. He was stronger than Wu Zixiong when he unleashed his full strength. Whoosh! 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 More than 10 saber glows slashed at Lu Ming.